Episode 30 of the What's a Hero podcast is on now. This one has Scott Dye in it. Scott Dye was an instructor at the police academy when I went, Marine Corps veteran, police officer, retired. This guy talks about love, loss, life in general. He's going to talk about faith and how he uses that to share with other people and just help bring other people up. So this is a good one. This is a guy you don't want to miss. Check out this episode. It's coming up right now.
This is episode 30 of the What's a Hero podcast with me, Ken Frownfelter. Now, this is kind of a milestone episode, even though I've kind of made every episode a two-parter recently. And the reason I did that is because I've had several people say, I wish they were short or whatever. Yeah, but you're talking to people and they've got so much to say and there's so much good that they're putting out there. We talk and there's life stories and this is basically, their testimony they're putting out there. So it goes sometimes to 3 hours. By some of you have noticed that, but so I'll cut them in half, a little more digestible. So thus making it a two-parter. I'm still trying to get the feel for whether or not that's working out, but let us know. That's why I ask you guys to go on to whatever social media platform you like to use, or even on reviews on Apple Podcast or whatever, and let me know what's going on. So we know what you guys like, how you guys like to digest the podcast. So with that being said, this is a milestone episode. This is the 30th episode, even though we've had more because I've cut them in half. But episode 30, I never thought I'd get here to have 30 episodes of a podcast, but that's cool that I have been able to do that. I've had some very gracious folks come on and say, hey, I'd like to be part of that, help you out, all that stuff like that. And some of the people we've had on here are just fantastic. And what I'm looking forward to are the next number of people who are going to come by and be on the show. So with that being said, today's guest is a very cool guy who I met years and years ago. So years ago when I was in the police academy, we had actually 3 instructors, 4 if you really want to look at it. And I remember a couple of their names, but I don't remember every instructor's name. And not every class had that many instructors. But one instructor that I did remember, he left a very positive impression on me, and that was because what he did is he presented everything in a very human side of it, right? So when he would teach a class or he would go through certain different instructions, he would treat it like, one, we're not students, but we're adults, we're humans who are trying to grasp um, this thing that's not always easy to grasp. And then outside of that, he would talk to us like we're humans as well, not like, hey, you're students, get over there, don't talk to me, anything like that. And not that anybody really ever did that, but there always seemed to be some kind of a separation even when you're adult learners in an adult institution. There is still that position where instructors are here and the students are down here, right? And so when you bring that up and you kind of change that mindset, when you're like, hey, no, I'm going to treat you like the human that you are because you're an adult. You got hired to do a job that not everybody can do and is most likely something that you can very well be killed for doing. That's where it came into play, where this person reminded us that what we're doing is a good thing, it's a right thing, and it's an honorable thing. Now, in doing that, he'd tell us stories that we would really get into, so we would learn kind of a little bit of his personal side. We learned about his kids, we learned about his family, and all this different stuff. And it made you just say, hey, you know what? That guy has a great attitude. Years later, I find out that he would reach out to people all the time, people that he didn't live near. It's not like they were always in his life, but he had developed relationships. He caught up with them and he said, hey, you doing okay? And I know one guy who lived hours and hours away from him got into a shooting, and he invited him up and made sure that he was okay, because he was one of his instructors as well. This guy just made sure people are okay. And that was a big thing. And so made such an impression on me that years and years later, I would assume that he would have forgotten who I was. Um, I was doing a color guard for a conference they were doing, um, and this instructor was there. He was just walking through the door, and he stops and he turns and looks at me and goes, "Hey, hey, how you doing? He just pulled me out of knowing that I was one of his students. He just wanted to check on me, see how I was doing, because he just saw me at such a quick little glance in a doorway walking. I was walking in, he was walking out. And it was one of those things that, how is it you remember who I was? I mean, I didn't think that I had that much of an impression on you, but apparently I had enough that he pulled me off to the side and wanted to see how I was doing and was happy to see me and all that stuff like that. And that made such an impression that he put his time, his effort into what he out of taken away from what he was doing, and and reminding me that, there's people out there who are happy to see other people, that want to see other people succeed. So I reached out to him and I said, hey, you know what, would you be willing to be on the show? And he said, absolutely, let's do this. So today we got with us a very special guest. He is not only a former instructor of mine, but he's a veteran. He's a former police officer. He's a teacher, and now he's a retired guy that enjoys retirement. However, if he knows you, he wants the best for you no matter what it is. And so these are the kind of people you want in your life. So I invited him to come on the show, and today we are honored to have Mr. Scott Dye joining us via the interwebs. Welcome, Scott, to the What's a Hero podcast.
Well, thank you, Ken. I think I remember when you asked me if I wanted to do it, and I was like, well, I know there's probably a lot better people to do a podcast than me, but I thought about it, and then I was like, yes, I will. And it's an honor to be able to be here, and even if we catch up to some former associates that I've had the blessing to be able to touch base with. That's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I kind of gave a little bit of a thing that, you're one of my instructors in the academy and all that stuff like that. But let's go way back before that. Let's go back to, who was little Scotty? Who was
goodness.
Who was this guy, this little kid that ran around? Did he just stay inside and cling to mom's heels the whole time while she did dishes, and he just colored in a coloring book, or did you do a little more?
Well, I was kind of a goofy looking kid. I had these big old black horn rimmed glasses, and my mom would dress me in plaid pants. And so I wasn't a nerd because I wasn't that smart. But it was funny because I was just thinking the other day, I was kind of, a goofy kid, but the things that we did as kids, I remember in second grade taking a big wheel and running it down a hill and jumping off of a wooden ramp that I built or put together, kind of. It wasn't even nailed. Right. And then later on the bicycle, jumping like Evel Knievel, because he was one of my idols. I'm surprised that I even survived my childhood. But most of the time we lived in a trailer park, Space 30, in Springfield, Oregon, Springtucky. And we Golden Oaks Trailer Park. I was right across from the pool. And we had one of the first double wides, so we were kind of upper class.
Well, look at you guys going.
And so I absolutely loved that pool, and I used to be there every summer swimming in it. And but I wasn't really ever that physical. And I think because, I don't know, I was in a car all the time with both parents smoking cigarettes. And when I was in fifth grade, I tried out for track, and I had an asthma attack, and they had to take me away by ambulance.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, gosh, I'm not going to be much into sports. And then, later on in life, I was able to, join the Marine Corps. I joined 3 months after I was 17 years old and got out of town. My mom had been married 7 times. And so it was,
wow.
And she probably would have went 8, but she passed away.
No,
or maybe 9 or 10.
Yeah. When you were in school, did you think, hey, I'm going to go in the Marines, or were you just like, I have zero idea what I'm going to do, I'm just living day to day, or what?
No, it was, I got in some trouble in my youth.
Yeah.
And so I was encouraged to join the Marine Corps. And so I thank the judge for that.
Yeah.
And then the Marine Corps changed my life. I have to say, I was, I graduated early. I was at high school, and I went to Lane Community College in the evenings, and was living in a 12-foot travel trailer for a while after I turned 16, and graduated, had enough credits to graduate early, and then joined the Corps when I was should have been halfway through my junior year,
Wow.
and then went in the Marines.
And obviously your mom had to sign off on that and all that stuff, right?
No, it was my adopting dad that signed off on that.
Mm.
You only needed one parent.
Yeah.
Yeah, she wasn't going to sign off on it, but
Oh, so nobody was necessarily approving of you going in specifically.
no.
Kind of begrudgingly, fine, this is what you're going to do, I guess. As opposed to getting in trouble with whatever the judge was going to throw at you otherwise, right?
Yeah, true.
So you decide at 17 and a half or whatever, go into the Marine Corps, obviously youngest guy in your platoon.
Probably youngest in boot camp out of the ones in boot camp. And I still remember one of my drill instructors, Sergeant Rohr. I mean, goodness, that was 40, I had to have been 42 years ago. And so Sergeant Rohr was crazy, absolutely crazy. And he had these big old Coke bottle glasses, kind of like what mine were.
Uh-huh.
And so he kind of took me under his wing, and I started doing real well in everything in boot camp. I was, I was doing well. The physical fitness, I was doing well. I was one of the faster runners, which I never ran before.
Right. And
besides,
you had asthma too, right?
well, I thought I did, but when I did the physical and everything, it never showed up, or and I was able to get in, and I've never had a problem ever in my life since. I mean, I've ran marathons and triathlons, and so I never had an issue.
Wow.
The Marines, they made you do the things. They would say, you will do this. And so there was no, I don't think I can do this. Like,
no, this is what we're doing. Oh,
what we're doing.
No, this is what you're doing.
So I got a lot of motivation from Sergeant Rohr, and he, I don't know his first name. I don't know anything, but he was a great DI. He was crazy. No, he was nuts. He was probably certifiable.
Wow. Yeah, I had one of those guys, and people that listen to this, may remember me talking about him in the first podcast, and we talked about him, and it was Staff Sergeant Richie, and he was just this he had this super grizzled face, and he had this he was from Delaware from what I remember, but he was just never, obviously they never smile, but he never, you never caught him smiling, even when you caught everybody else smiling, right? And this guy, he was just so mean all the time, at least he looked like it. And he would just yell all the time. He wouldn't talk to you in any way ever. He was, and it was just all these grunts and everything else, right? Well, for my I got a letter from my dad while I was boot camp that my great grandfather had passed away. And my dad had talked about, hey, well, I was going to tell you, it's been a couple weeks since this happened, and I was going to tell you, but if I told you, they'd take the chance of you, coming out of boot camp, and I know how much it would just put you back had you, left boot camp, and which they could have done, but my dad chose not to do that, so he held off. I said, okay, that's fine, I get it. Well, in doing that, I got this letter, and I was kind of upset. And so I was really close with my grandpa, at least in my mind. I was, I really liked him, and he was one of my favorite people. And when he passed away, it was saddening. So I was kind of, red eyed and kind of teary up and stuff like that. And buddy of mine came by, he goes, man, I'm sorry to hear that, and put his arm around me and all this different stuff. Well, we were doing inspections that night, afterwards, where people may have seen this in like Full Metal Jacket, where Sergeant Hartman's walking down and he's looking at everybody's fingernails, and they're all standing in their skivvies, right, and doing that. And so that's what was happening. We're standing there, got our hands out so he can inspect us and stuff. And Richie comes by, and he stops in front of me, and he looks at me, and he was always, like I said, he was always yelling. So everything was always loud. And he gets really close to me, and he starts saying, I saw you were crying earlier. What's going on? You okay? And I said, this recruit's fine because you can't use your first name. You can't use
Right.
me or I or anything. You refer to yourself in a third person. And he goes, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he goes, "You let me know if things are otherwise. You got that?" "Yes, sir." And he just moved on. But it was just this super, like I have compassion and I care about my men sort of thing. But he knew something was going on. But otherwise, he was just the meanest guy ever. I mean, to the point where we were lined up for classes one time, and he was and we were next to this other platoon. This other platoon breaks out in a fight, and they start fighting. He's single guy goes in there, and he starts yelling, "Get away from me!" and starts grabbing guys and throwing them. You see guys flying, and this guy easily had multiple confirmed kills under his belt. I'm sure of it, but he was just the toughest, meanest guy I'd ever met. But he took time out and showed some compassion for some kid that he didn't have to. And that made a really big difference for me, So you get those guys sometimes.
That was like in boot camp, there was a huge outbreak of food poisoning in San Diego at MCRD.
Uh-huh.
And it was on Spam. And I happened to eat my Spam that morning, and my buddies across the way because he didn't like Spam. So I had, he snuck me his piece so he could get it off his tray. And so I got pretty sick. And this was right before graduation. I mean, we weren't far. We were just doing, preparing for graduation. And I got so sick, we were in these tents. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of Marines laying in these tents, just vomiting and getting sick, and some real bad. And I was in there on this mat on the floor, on the ground, puking into a sack. And I remember Sergeant Rohr came in, and he knelt down and he said, "You better beat this." He goes, "I'm not going to have you not graduate with me." And same type of thing, same. It was pretty cool to know that he took the time out to come and see me. So that was neat.
Yeah, and it's cool, because in boot camp you get, I don't know how it was, but did you go in 70?
I signed up 79, and boot camp was right at the beginning of 80.
Okay, and so when I went in 94, and so if you're looking at that, then we had 3 days. If you were out of training for 3 days, you got cycled back. Was it similar to you?
It was. Yep.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So I ended up going back before I was all the way, but I wasn't puking my guts out. I had no strength, but yeah, I remember. I don't remember a lot about it. I remember laying on that dingy mat on the concrete in this tent and just puking my guts out. But actually, when I started feeling sick, we were at the doing pugil sticks.
Oh.
And I loved the pugil sticks, and I was having a blast. That warrior attitude and that going in there and screaming.
And back then, that 80s, 90s, things were a little bit more lax. I guess the same thing in the 90s too. Things were a little more lax. I mean, you can actually really beat on somebody, and you can really, they got a football helmet on and you got gloves, but otherwise you're going at it.
Oh yeah, it's 100 miles an hour, full speed. Yeah. And if you didn't knock the daylights out of your opponent, your DI was going to be screaming at you that all kinds of words.
It was usually platoon on platoon. It was.
Yeah, they cursed at us and they hit us back in those days.
Oh yeah. They weren't allowed to hit us. I mean, unless you were trying to hit them or fighting somebody else or something like that. But otherwise, couldn't.
Oh, he'd come up and headbutt you right there in inspections, and yeah, it was good times.
So you go to boot camp in 79, 80, and you go just going through the whole thing. And did you get out of boot camp? Did you go anywhere fun, or did you stay in the same place, or what'd you do?
So I was when I went in, they said that my aptitude test for the Corps, I would have been able to go into an electrician.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, why do I want to do that? I like to hike and camp, and plus I got a $2,500 bonus for going in as a grunt.
Right.
And so I went as a grunt, and so they put me as a mortarman. And so I went to Pendleton for training after boot camp, and then was going to be stationed there, and we were in holding, and I was going to 19 there at Pendleton, and myself and another buddy of mine, Dan, we hung out all the time, and he was really good at physical fitness and doing things like when we did the mortars, we set the record for the training division at the time, and so we were good buddies, and so he and I were sitting there, and one day somebody comes in and they said, "Hey, we need 2 volunteers." And they say in the Corps, don't ever volunteer, but
right.
And then he's finished it, said to go to Hawaii. Boom! Our arms went up. It was like, so I got stationed in Kaneohe Bay, and that was just awesome. I had never went anywhere as a kid, never out of Oregon, and well, maybe to Washington. I lived in Longview for a little while.
Yeah.
But never had been anywhere. So going to Hawaii was really cool, having the tropical, and then did a Westpac in 81 with the India company. And at that time, I saw these guys running around in UDT shorts and green T-shirts, and we were always in the red shorts with a white T-shirt for company runs and that. And these guys running around with UDT shorts and running with their fins and their UDT vest on, and I'm like, wow, what is that? And they're like, that's recon. And I'm like, that is cool. So I started training, and then at the end of Westpac in 81, I was able to test over in Philippines to get into recon. And I think there was, my buddy and I were talking about this the other day. I think there were 67 people that tested.
Mm-hmm.
And there were 4 of us, 6 made it, and then 4 ended up going to the platoon. So 4 of us got into recon after the testing and the interviews and the psych background and everything.
So there's a pretty good attrition rate then.
Oh yeah. It definitely, the physical part of it itself pretty much got you to where people were dropping out like flies. And then the mental part of it is not just the physical part, it was the mental part. And it was, I had a sore, the dryness of the weather and that. I had a sore on my side of my mouth, kind of a cold sore, I guess. And it was scabbing up a little bit from the dry and the heat. And they were saying it was something, medically. And then the one instructor made me get down on the ground and rub my face into the mud and the dirt until it peeled the scab off. So I had blood all on the side of my face, and just the mental aspect of that. So yeah, it was definitely challenging, but it was definitely worth it.
So you get into recon, and you said was it everything you thought, or what?
Oh yeah. The brotherhood and just the training. I think that part of it led me into my career, especially with the training. I was a training hog, man. Any training that ever came up, I wanted to go to the training and learn more and be around the people that were real successful at different things. And but yeah, it was great. We got a great bond of that brotherhood that never went away. I got a couple of guys I stay in contact with for over 40 some years. And one of them lives up in Seattle now, and we try to get together at least once or twice a year. And it's just like old times. So it's like, we'll go 2-3 years without seeing each other. And then when we do, it's just like it was just yesterday.
Yeah. I've got a couple friends like that. It's like those, I've got some cousins too, who are like that. We grew up together, all this stuff. And then you don't see them for years. And then all of a sudden you guys get back together and you can pick right back up. And actually, my last guest, John, he was that way. And he and I, we hadn't seen each other for 35 years. We totally lost contact with each other. And sure enough, it comes back up, and he's, we catch up, and we pick up right where we left off when we were 10 years old, 9 years old, whatever. So yeah, it's cool when you can do that. And so when you have relationships like that, that's very cool. So then you go through recon. Did you just stayed training the whole time, or did you get to, you go anywhere doing that, or was it just
No, Yeah, we went. So I went on two other Westpacks, and then we were in Beirut. We went into Beirut, and we went into Somalia. So we got to do some fun things.
You say fun things, blow stuff up. Now, was that Beirut? Was that during the when they took the Jewish students hostage, or was it during while they were getting ready to, when we thought we were getting ready to go into war with Beirut?
It was during the time. So we went over in October and of '83, and we ended up leaving 3 days before the airport bombing, where the 241 Marines were killed.
Right. Okay.
So I was with 3rd Recon, and 2nd Recon was actually there at the airport that were killed. And Recon, we only had 22 to 24 guys in our platoon, and so there was in A Company, 3rd Recon in Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii, there were 3 platoons, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and each platoon would be attached to a deployment of which would go out. We were 3rd Marines, and so 3rd Platoon, we went out and we were on that Westpac. The bombing, we had left Beirut 3 days before, and we were heading back up through the Suez Canal and we're heading to some other conflict. And I'm trying to remember if that was Somalia or where we were heading, but we left quickly. We there were some pictures of us in the New York Times and that of the Marines being in Beirut when we were there, which was pretty funny because we were in civilian clothes. We were in bathing suits, walking around, drinking these little Heineken beer cans, the little short ones. We traded some magazine parts of a magazine for some beer, and so we left 3 days before that bombing, where 2nd Recon was killed, and back home, my mom was told by the Red Cross that I was there and that I was dead. So
that's
she
awesome.
She was in Portland, Oregon, living in Portland in a little apartment then. And so she was on the news. Of course, all news would, go over there.
Yeah.
She had my boot camp pictures behind her, and where I looked like I was 14.
Right.
And she was, crying, and I don't know what all they said. I still have the VHS tape of her being on the news. And so then my lieutenant, he comes down. We were on a LPD, I think, at that time. And don't quote me on that. We were on different ships, so I was but we were on a smaller ship. And we were down. We had always had our own little area on the ship. So for Recon, and all of a sudden, my lieutenant comes down and he goes, "Die!" I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Sergeant, die!" I'm like, "Sir." He goes, "Get your butt up here."
Right.
And I'm like, "What did I do?" And I go, "What's up?" And he goes, "Your mom's being a pain in the ass." And so I had to go and get on ship to shore and get a hold of my mom and tell her that I was alive and to get off of the news and knock it off.
she's probably getting a hold of, all the news are getting a hold of her, and it's snowballing into this thing.
Oh yeah. So causing problems. So I was able to tell her that I was still around and I was okay and I was out of there, and not to worry.
Oh, that's too funny. Don't worry about me, but I got to go back and do some more stuff, but I'm alive. Right.
Yeah. The funny part was where I had went to school at, I never moved back. After I got out of the Marine Corps, I ended up going up to a small town and meeting and getting to know my biological dad. So I never moved. I never went back to my hometown. And so people, and social media wasn't there. There was no Facebook back then. And so there were people that thought I was actually dead for many, many years.
All they knew was from the news, and they thought, okay.
Yeah. And then, of course, the news never retracts anything.
No, absolutely not. And that wasn't true. Okay, well, we got another story over here we're working on.
Yeah,
so just moving on. So, yeah. So you go there, you go through all these different places, and I mean, it's cool getting to see the world, huh?
Oh yeah, I went everywhere. I was in Singapore, Hong Kong, Thailand, Australia, Africa, um, De Garcia, Greece. We just went. We were all over the place, and Singapore was cool. I saved a little girl's life there, and there were 5 of us, 3 from Recon and 2 from SEAL Team 5. We did a lot of work with those guys. They were attached on the same Westpac we were, and we were in Sembawang, Singapore, and a little girl drowned. We were going down these slides. It's called the Big Splash Swim Center in Singapore, and we were there having fun on Liberty.
Yeah.
And I lost a contact lens.
Okay.
So I stopped all my buddies. I'm like, guys, we got to find my lens. And we ended up finding it, but we found a little 2-year-old girl drowned underneath the water too. And so we pulled her up, and I started mouth to mouth while one of the SEALs started the CPR. We brought her back, and then she defecated herself and spit up, and there with the lifeguards there they didn't really know what to do with a young child like that, and they had a respirator that the thing was purging like 160 psi, would have blown her lungs up. Right. So the other 3 guys kept everybody else away while we were doing the CPR and the mouth to mouth, and we brought her back in 45 minutes. The ambulance came, and we were recognized, and we were getting in the papers, of course, when U.S. service members are doing something like that, and they make a big deal about it.
Right.
But we received accommodations for it through the Navy, and
that's pretty cool.
But she saved her life, so that was cool.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, you can only imagine what she's doing now. To be able to look back, and she could. If she could contact you or something like that,
Yeah, I didn't. We didn't know the name or anything. They finally picked her up from the ambulance, but we did find out later because Singapore was in contact with the admiral of the ship of our fleet, and said that she survived and she was fine.
That's cool. That's very cool. So, how long did you do that? How long were you traveling the globe?
A little over 4 years.
Yeah. So you just did one tour, is that right?
One tour, and then I was going to re-enlist, and I started working at a scuba diving shop in Hawaii. Mm-hmm. And I decided to get out and stay doing that instead of re-enlisting. Sometimes I wish if I would have met my wife while I was in the Corps, I would have stayed in.
Oh, really?
Because she's my biggest supporter on everything. And she would have been great.
That's like opposite. Most people are like, I met this person, that's what got me out or whatever. And you say just had you met her while you were there, you would have stayed in.
Definitely. I wanted to be a drill instructor really bad, and thought I never had jump school. I thought, well, if I re-enlist, they were going to give me jump school too. So I almost was there, but then I got out and stayed in Hawaii for about a year, little over a year, let my hair grow, and worked in a dive shop.
Yeah. And so you stayed in Hawaii until you said, I'm done with the island life, or?
Yeah, it was a crazy life over there. I mean, it's not for a young man.
Yeah.
It's go, go, go. It was always doing something. And one day I was like, you know what? I need to get out of here for a while. And so I was at the point where the Marine Corps wouldn't, if I waited any longer, they weren't going to send all my stuff back to the States.
Oh.
And it was getting at the end of my contract. And so I said, okay, I'm going. And so I got all my stuff, my Jeep and that, shipped back. And I went to Clatskanie, Oregon to, get to know my biological dad more. And then I ended up, that's where I met my wife.
Nice. And so you're up there because different life than traveling the world and being, or even living in Hawaii where it's just tropical and it's 75, 80 all the time. And, it rains, but it's nice rain. And then you move up to the Pacific Northwest where it's rain and not a nice rain. It's
Yeah.
cold part of the time. And so you move up there, and what were you doing? Were you go to work at
Well,
a grocery store or something, or what?
no, I actually, it's funny because I had put a resume together. And before I left Hawaii, I went to a job fair just because I thought, I want to work at a company and do something and corporation. And so I put a resume together and I went around and handed it out to these tables. And one guy, they all looked at it and they go, oh, because I didn't have any college. All I had was all my military training.
Military
And
grunt. That's what I did.
and this is what I did. And so one guy had the kahunas to give it to me straight, and I'll never forget it. And I was like, wow, okay, well, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to do something else. Because he looked at my resume and he goes, well, if we ever need a mercenary, we will call you. And I was like, wow, I guess I don't have anything that's going to help me. And so when I moved to Klatskanai, I didn't have a job, and I had met my wife, and so I decided to work in a sawmill for a while.
Okay.
And boy, is that an eye opener! Working in a sawmill. I did all kinds of jobs there. I did worked on the squeeze table, off bearing, which off bear, having the big logs come through the head saw, and you have to. And I was light, I was maybe 155 pounds. And the guy before me that did the off bearing had to be 320. And it was a lot of work to do it. And so I had done different jobs there. And I was like, man, this sucks.
Yeah. Mill work.
And then finally, and I never thought I could be a cop.
Yeah.
So I had on leave, I went to Valley River Center in Eugene. They had a job fair there. It was probably 2 years into the Marine Corps. And I went to this job fair when I was on leave just to go through there. And they had, I remember OSP was there.
Oregon State Police.
And I thought, they had, of course, it's a dog and pony show, like we used to have to do in the Marine Corps.
Right. Yeah. You shine all the brass and everything's shiny. And
oh yeah. So you do everything, you got your, we would do stuff with our, inflatables, or we'd spy rig in Marine Corps in recon, we spy rig, and we do all this cool stuff that people be, and so when it reminded me of that at the Valley River Center where OSP was set up, because they had their SWAT guys, the repelling, they had their boats, they had all this stuff set up, and I'm like, this is it. I'm like, this is what I'm called for. I go, this is right up my alley. So I went and talked to the guy, and we did a quick assessment, and he goes, well, you wear glasses or contacts? I go, yeah. He goes, well, what's your vision? And I told him what my vision was, and he goes, oh yeah, you don't qualify. You'll never be a cop. And because my left eye was pretty bad.
Yeah.
And even going through training, I had to fake it.
Early mid 80s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And that was probably 82. Oh. And they said, your eyesight's too bad. You'll never be a cop. And I'm like, ah. So fast forward to Klatskanai, and I'm working in a sawmill. The chief of police at Klatskanai was a Marine, former Marine, never former, but and he had been a cop for, I don't know, probably, close to Jesus's time. And we were talking one day, and being a Marine, and he goes, well, you want to be a cop? And I said, I can't. My eyesight's too bad. He goes, oh, baloney. And so I told him, and he goes, no. He goes, that the troopers have different standards, than us. And he goes, you can be a cop. He goes, is it corrected to 2020? I go, yeah. He goes, you can be a cop. So he grunted, I grunted, and I became a cop.
So, and that's got to be pretty cool, knowing that, you're working in the sawmill where you kind of feel dead end, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't keep doing this for the rest of my life. How's this? What else am I going to do? And everybody's telling me no. You got to be kind of depressing, huh?
Yeah, I started doing some other things. I quit the sawmill before I became a cop, because I was doing what's called snag diving in the Columbia River for the gill netters. And that there's not too many guys that would do it. Actually, I only remember 3. And so I was doing that on the side, and that was really good money. Back then, I was making $60 an hour.
Wow.
But
And
I would only do it a short time.
is that because of all your dive experience in the Marine Corps and everything else, and then working at the dive shop in Hawaii? You had just knowledge of being able to what it took to do that.
You had to kind of be a little crazy for snag diving. You're crawling down in the Columbia River, the gill nets, because it gets snagged on something like a rip wad or a log. So you're climbing down this net, holding a cable onto your belt or attached to your weight belt. And you climb down in the dark water and feel around what it is. And there had been a couple of the guys died trying to do it over the years.
Oh, wow.
And so you then wrap the log or the rip wad with the cable and jerk on it a few times where the tender above on the boat would tighten it up, and then they'd jerk that out or use a snag scow, which is a crane, and they'd lift the logs or the rip wads out of the water. And we'd clean the bottom of the Columbia River. So when they put their good nets in during the fishing season, because they had short seasons, then the nets could smoothly go down and gather the fish and not get snagged up and lose their haul.
Oh, wow.
So we would clean the bottom of it before season started in February, and then again in August. So it wasn't a lot, but I was booked solid every day that I could be.
Yeah.
And I had finally said, I'm done at the sawmill. So I quit and was going to do that. And I was working, I just got hired on at Tidewater Barge Lines as a deckhand, and was only there for a month when the chief had offered me the position. And so
that's pretty cool.
I said, I'll do that.
And had you ever thought about being a cop? I mean, other than time, I mean, it was just like,
yeah, I've thought about it. My neighbor was a cop, and he was kind of a mentor to me, and Larry lived right next to me. And so, and I'll even say his name, Larry Clow. He is like he's a cop's cop. The guy was just awesome.
Yeah. And
so we would hang out. And so, he was the one too that motivated me that way.
That's pretty cool. And so what was it that drew you to it? Was it just the stories that Larry would tell, or was there something more to it that you said, I think that's what I wanted?
Well, I think a lot of it back then was when you get out of the military and you're so structured, the uniform, you have equipment that you have to take care of, you have a certain mission to do, you have, you have the oath that you take, and all that was just very inviting to me. It was like, that's what I still wanted to be a part of. And my wife was like, I said, supported. We were married then, and she was so supportive. She goes, she was always telling me, you can do whatever you want to. And she still that way. And, it was the everything, the esprit de corps, the mission that it is, going out and helping people, and then also, carrying a gun, driving fast, having high speed adrenaline rush. It was, and so, and back then there was no, I'm into this because I want the community policing, which is a huge, big part of, law enforcement. But back then too, I mean, it was like, I want to go drive fast. I want to drive a police car. I want to chase people that are bad. It's like, and that was my interview too. After the chief and I grunted, I was like, I'll do anything you tell me to. Tell me to charge whatever hill. And so it worked out well.
That's pretty cool. So you kind of glazed over this a little bit, but maybe we'll get back to it. Yeah, we'll go back to it later. But you're going through this whole. You said, hey, you get hired by Klatskanai and you go working for them, and just everything you thought it would be, or what? Yeah,
it was. I loved Klatskanai. It was small, small department. We had 5 members, but real quick, I got to where I wanted to do more. I wanted training, and I was always into defensive tactics. I was into martial arts when I was in the Marine Corps, and I wanted to do more. And I ended up I went to boot camp, sorry, I went to the academy. It was only 8 weeks long, but I met Howard Webb, and I mean, like, what a phenomenal martial artist. And so he had said, hey, I went, and after I got the Defensive Tactics Award at the academy,
Right.
and he said, hey, I want you to come back as an instructor. And so I told my chief that I wanted to go through this training. It was an 80-hour, 2-week defensive tactics training. And he goes, we don't need you as a defensive tactics trainer. And we didn't have the budget. We didn't have the mindset back then to do a lot of training. And that, to me, after a while, I got frustrated with it.
Sure.
And I was like, I wanted an agency where I could do more training. And then I was fortunate enough to, on a vacation, my wife and our son and our daughter rented a motorhome, and we left a gas cap in Coos Bay, Oregon.
Right.
And so that always stuck with us. And then one day on the teletype machine, on job positions used to come through the fax machine on the teletype.
Uh-huh.
And I saw there was a job opening in Coos Bay for patrolman lateral.
Right.
So came back to my wife and said, there's a lateral position in Coos Bay. And this is where her family was in Clatskanie. She grew up in Clatskanie. And she goes, let's go. And so I tested and got hired in Coos Bay.
That's pretty cool. And that was obviously different because it's way south and on the beach there in Oregon. So you're just having gone through there, you just kind of thought, hey, that's really cool. And obviously they're bigger, so you were able to do a little bit more training like you were hoping.
Well, I did the research on them, and they were very definitely into training. And they had a training officer. They had, at the time, I think there was 28 or 30. There were 30 officers at Coos Bay.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, I think we were up to 32. And Coos Bay was just a very active city. And so I was like, man, this is good. I mean, Clatskanie was great. It was, most of the time it was boring, but the two shootings that I happened to be in were both in Clatskanie. So I involved with, so Clatskanie is a little town, but yet, things can happen anywhere.
Right.
And it would be dull, and then there would be, moments of, complete adrenaline rush and craziness. But then Coos Bay, bigger, more action every day, more to do. And it was awesome because while there, I got to be, the first thing was become a defensive tactics instructor.
Right.
And then a vehicle stops instructor. And then I went through DRE school and field sobriety instructor, and just became, immersed in the training and being able to train. And it was tough too, because we had a lot of old timers at Coos Bay PD.
Okay.
Nobody left Coos Bay PD. They really didn't. Back then, there were people, I had, but when I got down there, 6 years experience, and I'm dealing and having people on the platoon that one platoon I was on, there was a combined like 120 some years of experience just with 4 other people, so it's like, and then to get them to be motivated to go do, we used to call it red man training back there because with the red suits, and it was
right.
And that was the first, CONSIM training that was out there. And we would do that, and they're like, oh, I don't want to do this stuff, and
Right.
so to motivate people that are senior and to get you to get them motivated about it, you had to come up with different ways to make everybody,
right,
take it serious and do the training. But
right.
they did a great job. They all did a great job.
That's hard to do. People they're used to a certain way. Hey, well, we like to, do XYZ, and this is how we do whatever. And then you say, well, hey, I want to try to mix it up, and let's do this. And you're a young guy, and you got all this energy, and you've been doing all these things, and all of a sudden you come in and, hey, let's do this. No, we don't. That's not what we like to do. This. I know, but look at all the studies that show this is actually beneficial. I know, relax, kid, and you're like, you're just chomping at the bit because you want to do more stuff. And you're right. It's not coming from a negative point. It's just, you know, things have worked this way. Why do we need to change it up? So, but going back to Klotzk and I really quick, when you have a small department like that, and this is mostly for, people that may not know or just wondering, you go out there and you may be the only police officer on duty. You may be the only one that's going into to whatever. Is that always the case, or did you would work with your sheriff's office, right? And they would come.
Yeah, they were sheriff's office and Oregon State Police. We had a really good relationship with the county and OSP, and it was a great working relationship. We even have every year we'd have a Christmas party, and together, all the county, OSP, Rainier PD, Clatskanie PD, we would all get together, and that was pretty cool that we would do that every year. Yeah, there was good relationships made there, but there were times that you do a domestic by yourself because the only person on call, the county might be all the way up north or in Vernonia, which is, an hour away from you.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are times that you would have to do calls all by yourself. So you learn to be able to, and I got to say, I think it really made me who I was later on.
Yeah.
Because there was a time, I'm thinking back, that at the Northwoods Lounge, there was a guy that was in there that was suspected to be possibly armed with a shotgun. And he was one going around and robbing some stores.
Mm-hmm.
It was in the evening and somebody had saw him and he matched the description. So I pull into the parking lot and I'm thinking, well, I'm trying to get backup. Backup's like, yeah, they're like 40 minutes away. All right, try to call somebody out. Okay, we can't get a hold of anybody. Because everybody always got called out. If you're off duty, you get called out into calls. And a lot of times you show up the way you are in blue jeans or shorts and flip-flops even at times. But so I'm standing out there in the parking lot and I'm going to myself, what do I do? I got to get in there in case this guy is the guy and he's possibly going to hurt somebody or do something. And at that time, the truck, a crummy truck or old truck, pulls in, and it's a bunch of guys that are gill netters. They're the fishermen. They do that. That's their living.
Right. And
they knew me from my snag diving.
Okay.
And so they all jump out, and there's some of them are some big boys. I'm not that big. I was always athletic, but I'm only 5'8", and at that time probably 158, 160 pounds, if 160.
Right.
And and I had a lot of confidence. I was pretty scrappy, but they get out and they go, "Hey, Scotty, what are you doing, man?" And I'm like, "You guys can't go in there right now." "Why is that?" "And there's a guy in there that's possibly," so I'm trying to wait for backup. "We'll be your backup." And I'm like, I can't do that. And then everything else, there was nobody that could come. That was it. So I said, "Okay, come in with me. Do not do anything unless I'm getting my butt handed to me and I'm on the ground. Then you can do whatever to save my butt."
Right.
And they're like, oh yeah. And these are some big knuckle draggers,
They're looking forward to you seeing you.
Oh yeah, they're like, oh yeah. And so I walk in there with these 4 guys behind me. I tell them, just stay behind me. And I called the one guy out and he just looked, and these guys are like drooling, waiting for something to happen. And this guy was very compliant. And so he came out and he was a perfect gentleman. And he was unwanted in there, but he wasn't the guy that we thought it was. And I ended up 86ing him out. But these guys, so my theory on that is if you're treating people correctly, people know what rules are.
Right.
And if if they're doing something wrong, they know, and they will respect you as long as you treat them with respect.
Right.
And I had time after time in Clatskanie, where community members would come and say, "Hey, do you need any help? Do you need this?" Which was pretty cool. And and sometimes I go off on this rabbit hole, but there was my first day as a police officer in Clatskanie.
Mm-hmm.
I was with Tom Turk, who was my training officer, one of them. Right. And Tom had been at Forest Grove, and then he was at Clatskanie, and then he went to Jackson County, ended up retiring in Jackson County. Well, Tom, we got a call with a guy named Maynard, and he was known to get intoxicated and want to fight, the police. So
right.
Tom says, "Come on, we got this call. He's over at that Northwood Lounge, and we got to go. We got to go there." And I said, "Fine." I mean, this is like my second day.
Right.
And so I'm standing there, and I'm just standing there with my hands in front of me and, clasped, and my left hand over my right, just standing there watching it. Tom was talking to him and kept staring at it. And then he would look over at me and stare at it. And then he'd look away, and he'd look over and stare at me. And he'd look over and stare at me. And then he pointed, "I don't like him." And I hadn't said anything.
Right.
And so he was still looking at me. And then all of a sudden he decided he was going to hit me. And he took a couple of steps, and he's drunk in slow motion.
Right.
And he takes a punch at me, and I sweep his punch, and I push him away and take a step back, and I stand there with my left hand over my right again, just standing there, squared off. And Tom tackles him, gets him on the ground, and he's struggling with him, and he's trying to get it. And I'm just standing there watching.
Yeah.
And Tom took him a while, but he got him all cuffed up, and he's out of breath. And Tom gets him up and puts him over to the car, and he goes, "Why didn't you do anything?" I go, "You were doing fine." I go, that was really good." And he goes, "Why didn't you help?" I go, "Well, it would have been 2 against 1. I go, because I had no training at all. I mean, this is my second day. I was like in the Corps. I mean, it's like, unless you're getting your butt kicked, then you have somebody jump in.
You do it 1-on-1. You don't need to. Yeah.
So Tom was like, "No." He goes, "You always help." I go, "Oh." I go, "Doesn't seem fair." But of course, yes, before I learned anything. And,
sure.
But that was kind of a comical time. So
right.
My story on that, though, I had dealt with Maynard numerous times after that.
Okay.
And there's other times that he tried to do something, and I would cuff him up, and he would go to jail. And then fast forward, 10 years later, I'm on night shift at Coos Bay.
Right.
And dispatch calls me, says, "Hey, you got somebody in the office or in the lobby that wants to see you?" I'm like, "Okay." I go, "Who is it?" And Clatskanie to Coos Bay, 6 hours away, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And they go, "Maynard?" And they said his last name. I won't say his last name today. And I go, "What? What's he want?" I go, "Has anybody seen if he's armed, or got a knife?" And
we get one of our dispatch with the little girl going and checking for weapons.
Yeah, they're like, "No, he's in the lobby. He talked to us over the intercom." And I'm like, because it was after hours. And so okay, I'll come in. So I went in there. I'm like, "Hey, Maynard." And he comes over and gives me a handshake. I shook his hand. Mm-hmm. And I go, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "I just heard you were down here. I'm down here. I'm a foreman. I'm working on a crew. And I wanted to tell you how much I appreciate you and all the times that you put up with me and how good you were and respectful." And I'm like, wow. He made that attempt to come in and seek me out. And I thought, I'll never forget that. I thought that was one of the neatest things. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. And that's cool. I mean, that's a testament to the way that you treated people, or your character, how people able to just grasp onto it and know that, when you deal with somebody, you're not coming from a point of malice, or you're not trying to hurt their feelings or embarrass them or ruin their day or whatever. You're honestly, you're trying to do what's right, but you want to help them in the process. So that's cool. I mean, that's not something you see too much by too many people. So.
Yeah. And that's kind of been how I've always, my own attitude. And that is to, be positive, have a good attitude. And I remember I went through verbal judo instructor school with George Thompson, and he was a great guy. And he used to say, you put the uniform on that, it's showtime. He goes, fake it until you make it.
Right.
And if somebody doesn't have that, you can change your attitude around by at least just, don't do anything you're completely uncomfortable with. But I was always like going, no, you got to have a good attitude. Go in and don't be, oh goodness. Hey, can we pause for just a second?
Absolutely.
Okay. Hold on for a minute.
No worries. Do your thing.
Hey, how are you? Good. I'm actually on a podcast. We paused for a second, but I saw it was you, and I go, oh, this is
Recorded and so you guys were being over in Coos Bay. You're over there doing what you do. Talk with Maynard after, just being cool with him and showing him how, this is how you treat people. And he just remembered that. And so that's kind of cool that you were able to come back to that point. And so you're over. Go ahead. What?
I said, I've always had you don't have to respect somebody.
Yeah.
Because all the people that we would deal with in law enforcement, the majority of them are doing something wrong, or we're thinking, have they done something wrong?
Right.
You don't have to respect somebody, but you have to show respect.
Right.
And I always tried, and some people aren't upbeat, but the only real complaint I got was I was doing an investigation on arson, and the mother of the suspect thought I was too happy. It complained to the chief. But so you don't always have to be upbeat, but it sure does help, and it also helps your own life. I'm tightly wound.
Yeah.
I mean, I am, I joke with ADD, but I seriously have issues. And if I wasn't upbeat, I could see it spiraling down into a hole. And so it makes life much easier. I mean, even with raising kids as being a cop is tough, because my wife, she's the easiest going, the biggest heart. Everybody loves her. And she's so easygoing on things. And here I am always thinking about things. And she would say too, when raising our kids is, stop being a cop at home. You're not a detective
here. Yeah.
And it's tough not to be, though. We say turn it on, turn it off, but realistically, you're not able to do that. And
there's that point where you're getting ready to go to the grocery store and you're putting your gun on or whatever. And some people look at that like, you're just going to the grocery store. Yeah. But who's to say I'm not going to run into somebody that I upset, that I don't know I upset, and I had no intention of doing it personally, but yes, I do that. I also am taking my family with me, and I don't want, so I don't know how many times I've seen people like, oh, hey, Frownfelter's going. And I've got my kids in tow, right? My wife, and we'll go down, we're getting ready to turn down an aisle at a store. And I'm like, nope, we're going to go down to the next one or whatever. And my wife's like, why are we doing, why? I said, you're just going to do it. And she's learned that, she said, when I say that, she just goes with the flow. She just has to, and she gets it, and so she's supportive in that way. And there's one time we were in Aruba. We were on vacation, and we went into the store, and she's looking at, and it was a clothing store, and it was in the downtown district, right? And just looking at the whole thing. And Aruba's not a huge island, but the entire country is on this little tiny island. But we're going through, and she's looking at these different clothes, and I'm just kind of, it's a clothing store for women, and I'm bored out of my mind, right? So what do? I'm just kind of standing there looking around, and these two guys walk in, and the one girl, they had the check register was at the back of it's like a rectangular, layout of this room for the shop, and the check register is at the back of the room. And then, so they got a girl at the check register, and they got another girl. She's over there, tagging clothes or whatever, and put them on the racks and things. And these two guys walk in. As soon as they walk in, they just separate. Boom. I mean, totally out of place. One dude has dreads, and the whole thing, and another guy, he's just, they go and they separate. They go to each of the girls, and so the one guy's just kind of leaning on a counter at the check register talking to her, and the other one is talking to the other girl, and they're very laissez-faire, very leaning on stuff and really close. And I'm looking at this, and my wife she's holding these things up. Hey, what do you think about this? Hey, do you like this color? All this different stuff. And I said, and I'm looking around and I'm not paying attention. She goes, hey, I'm hello, pay attention to me for a second. And I said, we got to go. And she says, well, why? And I said, we have to go right now. And she goes, okay. So she just puts the stuff back and we leave. And she's like, we get down the road and she's like, why did we go? I said, you see those two guys walk in? She goes, yeah, I saw them. I didn't see. So she gets it. She goes, yeah, they walked in and they just separated, went right to the girls. I said, yeah. She goes, what do you think that was? I said, I'm thinking shakedown, you want protection for your company or your business or whatever. And you're in our neighborhood. And she's like, oh my gosh, I totally missed that. I didn't even, holy. And so but she goes, okay. So she said, from that point on, that was early on in our marriage too. And she said, from that point on, anytime I said, hey, let's go, or we're going to go down this way or whatever, she just does it, doesn't question. And we go the different way. And, she gets it. So it's like you were saying, there's that knowledge, there's this respect for you to trust you.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because there's nothing better than so we used to joke. My wife is, like I said, she's just she's like an angel. But there's nothing that we wouldn't have conversations about at the dinner table. We always had dinner. We would sit down at the table and have dinner. We never just went in front of the TV and watched. When the kids were little, we still, and she would do things like, if I worked graveyard shift, she would make breakfast for dinner for them. It would be dinner for them, but it'd be breakfast for me. And so we still would sit down and before I go into work. But we talked about things. Now, my wife is also completely, she's never shot a gun. And Here I am. I love guns. Mm-hmm. But she knows she can clear one. She knows how to clear it if she needed to, but she's never been out shooting because it's not her thing.
Right.
And the thing is, she knows, though, the same thing as you were saying. We'll start to drive out of the driveway, and let's say we take her car, and I had come home from something, and my weapon, my pistol was kind of bugging me, so I put it in the center console just to drive.
Right.
And then we're switch cars. We're going to leave. I go, stop. We got to go back. And so I drive back all the way into the house, open the garage, grab it out of my truck, and put it in, into the car, back in my waistband. Uh-huh. I don't go, to this day, I still don't go anywhere without having a firearm. Mm-hmm. And it's, and especially the way crazy things are. And I've been out of law enforcement now for, I don't even know what year it is. So it's about
2020,
14 years, I guess. No, it hasn't been that long. No, 12 years, 13 years, somewhere there, 12 years. And I still carry my weapon. And when I went to the corporate world, I've got friends all over the place in law enforcement, and I'd fly into Nevada, or I fly into Idaho, or I fly into Oakland. And I have people that I know there that would, because trying to check it, because I was on flights all over the place, and it's a pain to try to check a weapon. So I had guys, if I was staying there for 3-4 days, they were let me use a pistol.
Oh, wow.
And I also, even on flying in that, this pin here is one of those called a bullet pin.
Okay. Yeah.
It's got the flat part on top. It's got the good sharp end on the bottom. I carried this everywhere. And even on the plane, if I had to stab somebody, this is my, this pin is my go-to pin, because this thing is an awesome pin.
That's cool.
And and I'm thinking I can do a lot of damage with that pin. I'm very confident with the pin. Right. Not for writing. I can't spell, but I sure can stab somebody.
Yeah. Because you're a mercenary. And
yeah,
companies are hiring those. That's right.
That training, though, of having and just be that situational awareness, especially for your family. Now, my wife is the same way. Over the years, she has built that up, and her discernment on reading people is amazing. And you know, testing and the certain tests and that, her discernment's very high. My discernment is very high. And she has caught things from people that maybe I wasn't looking at that, and she'll say, hey, there's something up there. I'll look over and go, you're right. Or she'll say, I don't like that guy. Just because, and then find out, oh yeah, that person has done some really bad things. So not to judge them, but have that where you're using it for your own safety. And my kids, I used to teach, don't, in the grocery line, don't say, my dad's a cop, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And for police officers to not carry a weapon off duty, shame on you. Absolutely shame on you. And, you know, there's a lot of people, well, you don't need to carry it all the time. No, you're in this job. And today, with everything there is, with everybody that hates cops, and even in my time, well, I'm good friends with Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman.
Right.
I mean, we talk, oh gosh, at least every month. And I've helped him out. He's helped me out. And what he teaches on, if I didn't carry my firearm and he found out about it,
Yeah.
I'd never hear the end of it, you know, because I'm supposed to be one of his associates. And so,
Right.
and that's a motivator there to always have it, because I wouldn't want him to learn that I had ever went anywhere without one, you know.
Right.
And
so when you say, you say, and this is, and I get it, but for others, you're not saying you have that so you can, because you're worried that somebody's going to be attacking you at any minute, correct? Is it?
No, both. So how would you feel? This is the way that it happened. I knew a situation where I was working, and two guys came into the gas station attendant and shot him point blank, put him down on his knees and shot him. They were going to kill him. He didn't die. And they took off and left.
Right.
I found out there was a sergeant that was at that gas station 15, 20 minutes before that happened. And he never packed his weapon when he was off duty. And so I thought of that going, man, what would have happened if he would have been there? He couldn't have done anything to save the guy because he didn't have his weapon, and he probably would have been shot too. There was one, and that was early on in my career. That was in the late 80s. And I was like, man, what if I was ever in a situation to where all of a sudden somebody is doing something in front of me and I can't do anything about it because I'm not too close.
Right.
And I didn't have my firearm to protect somebody. At church, when we attend church, I'm always packing my firearm.
Mm-hmm.
I always sit in a position that I can watch all the entrances. And especially because of things that have happened around the nation in churches. And it's like, so I always pack. And the pastors know I do, and they appreciate it. It was funny. I was doing they asked me to do the opening one day at church and a message.
Mm-hmm.
And I was unsure about it because I was new with Christ, and I was like, he said, no, I really want you to. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know what to say. So I went up and told a story of my family, you know, and what it meant to me. And the pastor comes up and he puts his arm around me, and then we pray together, and his hand is on my gun,
right,
underneath my shirt. And I'm thinking to myself, he's got his hand on my gun.
right.
You know, and I was like, usually training, you know, I'd knock his hand off, but or anybody's. And I'm like, okay, don't do that to pastor. And and it was funny because he, not till later, he goes, that was your gun, wasn't it? And I go, yeah, that was my gun. And we're in front of 400, 500 people, you know.
Right.
Right. Yeah, it's pretty funny. But yeah, it's not just, and it is for you too. I mean, if I was with my family, my wife, or even friends, and something happened, and I didn't at least try to protect them because I can. And that's the thing is, if you're able and you're lawfully able to carry your firearm at all times, then you should. You have a job that you've chosen to wear. I mean, I've had death threats about me. I've had the outlaw biker gangs threaten me because of my drug dog.
Right.
And I had my picture of me and my dog in a clubhouse that was up on the bulletin board. It was like, that's a little unnerving. So
Sure.
the not having taking it with you at all times. If you ever get into a situation, at least you have that opportunity and you have that tool with you.
Right.
If you don't, and something happens, then you'll never be able to. I would never be able to live with myself.
Right. Right. I think of it like, in that respect, you see people working out and people say, well, why do you work out so much? Or why do you train in martial arts? Or why do you do X, Y, Z? And, I've had a couple people, that have, they've started working out. They're like, man, I feel better doing, after some time working out or whatever. And I get to thinking, I've got friends who they raft the rivers all the time and like rapids and all that stuff like that. And they take their kids with them. And I try to explain, I said, okay, when you work out, you're able to do stuff. You're much more capable. What happens if your child falls in the water and yeah, they got their vest on, but they're getting ready to go through some rapids. When you're in a boat, you're still getting knocked around and stuff like that. And so imagine somebody floating in the water on rocks and whatever in rapid area. And he's like, yeah, okay. I said, can you honestly put yourself, when there's a big undertow or whatever, can you put yourself in the water and pull your child back into your raft? And they were like, no, I don't think I can. I said, so if you work out, and they started working out, and I said, now do you think you could do it? Yeah. Oh yeah. I would actually, we were playing the other day, and it was easy for me to get my kids, throw them in the boat or whatever. And we were in the water. And I said, see, the difference is you've been trained, you've trained yourself when you're working out, but you've trained to the point where you're capable of doing something. And now when you have to do it, it's easier to do it. You're more capable, and you feel comfortable knowing that everybody's going to be all right, if you're around. So I think of the same mentality is you carry a gun, you shoot, you train with it, you do all these different things. You have this mindset of, I've gone through a bunch of stuff. I've seen some negativity. I've seen some horrible things. And so when I know what's not normal. And so when I see something that's abnormal, I can address that. I'm comfortable doing that. I'm comfortable addressing this, not just for myself and keeping myself safe, but everybody else around me, my kids. Yes. But then there's other people that, what if there's, like you said, at church, there's an 80-year-old lady, does she deserve to be traumatized or even killed because somebody has some kind of weird agenda? You have the ability to go do something, or you have the ability to prepare yourself to go do something. You have to see that there's all these possibilities, that it could go really bad. It can be horrible, but you have the ability to be that one thing that stands in the way of somebody hurting other people. And it totally makes sense to me, what you're saying, that if you can do it and you're that guy, you might as well, you have those skills.
Yeah, well, that's like you bring that up about rafting. I mean, they wouldn't let their children go where they go without a flotation device on.
Right.
Not if they're shooting the rapids that are, different classes. And so it's the same thing. It's kind of my life jacket. And my wife and I bought kayaks last year, and I have a dry bag, and I throw a dry bag. In that dry bag is my pistol. It might take me a little bit longer, but again, you never know.
Right.
So yeah, and people say, yeah, they go, you're not, and I go, I'm not paranoid. I'm prepared. I prepare for anything, and I'm getting older. I mean, I'm 59 next month, and so it like loading the firewood. I cut that firewood and threw it in the trailer yesterday, and I'm sore today, so I don't have that ability. And my mind still says you can do anything. And I was telling my wife yesterday, I said, I really want to get back into really working out with martial arts more again. And she laughed at me. She goes, really? And I'm like, well, okay, maybe not. I mean, I have all these different things I've had to have surgeries over because of that. And I have to, I haven't have to have a surgery on my right ulnar nerve now because it's collapsed inside that, just because of those things, elbow strikes and everything. But my mind still says, oh yeah, let's go do that. I go down, I work out a little bit here and there, but not like my mind wants to do it. But,
sure.
So I got to be prepared other ways. I figure out, well, like digging, I'm not going to go dig. I'll use a tractor. and try to figure out other ways to do things that I used to be able to do, but now I make it a lot easier. So I'm getting smarter finally in my,
Yeah,
my,
I guess there's a difference between and I've mentioned this before about being I used to, there's a difference between I used to do it because I was 19 and I could do anything, and I can't do it now because I'm lazy, or I can't do it now because I'm older, because I'm not 19 and my knees I couldn't go jump out of a plane like I could have at 19 at 50 years old, or however old somebody is, because it's just life. But if you don't do something because I'm lazy, or I'm you're scared, or whatever the case is, there's a point where that could affect somebody else. So
you gotta stay active too. That's like, I say my wife is 37 because she looks 37, and I've been stuck on that for many years, but she is very active. She keeps me busy.
keeps you going.
And you got to stay busy, and you got to keep doing things and living life.
Yeah. So let's go back to Coos Bay. So you're there, you're hanging out, you're doing cop stuff. How long were you there in Coos Bay?
I got there, I think 91 or 92, and I was there until 98 or 99, into 98. Yeah.
And
so Mark Adams was the chief there. And then Mark took the chief's job, I think in 97 or 98 in Kaiser. And he tried for a year to get me he had one other person go up with him, followed him up to Kaiser. He tried to get me up there for a year, and I was like, nah. And I had the drug dog, and it was DRE, getting lots of overtime down in Coos Bay. And then I ended up making the change, but I was down there and for almost 8 years, I guess, or 8 years. But I would have stayed too. I would have stayed there the whole time. I got to attend a change of command ceremony from one of my really good friends, Gary, who was just retired as a chief there. And the incoming chief, that was his deputy chief, was one of my recruits at the academy. So I got to be there with those two and watch, and it was really cool to be there. I would have stayed, and I loved Coos Bay. I loved Coos Bay PD. And Mark talked me into going up. And my best friend at the time, Ken, went up before me, and he was also a DT trainer, and we did everything together. So between the chief and my buddy talking me in, I made the change and went up to Kaiser. So.
That's pretty cool. And did you just stay doing the defensive tactics and stay doing
DRE?
Do anything else while you're up there?
Not DRE. Oh, well, I was on the traffic team. Early on, I was on the SWAT team in Coos Bay, Columbia County. Then at Coos Bay, I was still doing all the training. We did the defensive tactics, vehicle stops, building searches, and Ken and I were our main instructors for that. And I did, I was on traffic team. I did DARE, actually. The chief came up to me one time, and I was working on a platoon, having a blast, because it was very active there, which was cool. Yeah. And I was having a blast on the platoon, and the chief came up and said, "Hey, you're going to go into DARE." And I go, no, I'm not. Absolutely no way. And I am not ready to leave the street.
And DARE, for those folks that don't know, is that whole dare to keep kids off drugs. And,
yep, it was
DARE, what did DARE stand for again?
Drug Abuse Resistance Education.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
And it was a full-time position. We were in the schools, and it was a 3-year commitment. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going. No way. Well, yeah. Then the next month I was in DARE training and became a DARE instructor, and I got assigned my 3 schools and a middle school, 3 elementaries and a middle school. But then, and I chewed too before I went into DARE. I chewed Copenhagen, loved it.
Yeah.
And then I couldn't, I mean, if I'm going to go in and teach, I couldn't do that. So I quit, which was a tough thing to do.
Yeah.
And I quit chewing. So I'm like, I can't be, going in there and doing one thing and telling the kids not to do it.
Right.
So I I quit and I went into the schools and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. It was probably one of the best things I had done. Man,
All right. So you're working for Dare and you loved every minute of that, huh? That was,
at first I wasn't going to go. I said no. And then the chief bribed me too and said, well, if you do that, we have a canine position going to be open in a few years. So that would look good if you did, Dare first. And I was like, oh man. So
and that was
I went in.
Coos Bay.
That was Coos Bay.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Coos Bay. And I was like, man, and I always wanted a patrol dog. After Dare, I ended up getting a narcotic dog, but which was still cool. And so I went in kind of not wanting to do Dare, but it wasn't even the first class when I was up there teaching the kids, and I just got to rapport with them, and I would be out on the playground. I'd be playing tetherball. It's just soccer, just immersing myself in the whole thing. And it was cool because the kids that I was teaching at being 10 years old were a couple years older than my son.
Oh, uh-huh.
And so it gave me more insight of kids and what they're like and being in the schools and seeing them, because I didn't want to go to the schools at all. Like there was a call. I was like, you didn't want to go up to the school.
Right.
And when we first started, there used to be times at the high school, you'd ride the mountain bikes because we had a mountain bike that we were certified on mountain bikes, and we would take mountain bikes out.
Right.
And kids up there would be like, pigs on bike. And then later, after a few years and working with the kids at the high school too, for being the mentors and being the role models for the DARE program, and I'd walk up there, I'd get high fives, and it was a completely different experience after being in the schools and seeing the kids grow up into going in from, elementary into junior high and junior high into high school, and having that rapport. And it was rewarding. It was very rewarding. And there were some kids that, oh man, I felt like, adopting. There was one, I'll never forget. I won't use his name because I ended up, after I got out of the schools and got the drug dog,
right,
I was out at a residence and my dog found quite a bit of methamphetamine. And it was he had been, on probation and busted before. So he ended up going to prison. And he called me and said, hey, I want you to go take my kid to lunch. Let him know it's not because of you, it's because my poor choices and because my kid always respected you. And so I did.
Mm-hmm.
I went, took the kid out, and then we ended up hanging out quite a few times, have him ride along with me and just staying in touch. Right. Well, he's one that we have, I've watched him grow his own family. I've watched him get married, be successful. We'll talk once or twice a year, and for 20, 30 years now.
Wow, that is cool. And that's really cool because you don't see that too often, that actual, break that cycle of, a lot of times is somebody does something, their kids will follow in their footsteps, and it just follows along that way. And, sometimes you have the black sheep or the white sheep or whatever. But in this guy's case, he didn't follow his dad's footsteps. He didn't blame the cop that arrested his dad or whatever. He was able to understand that it was his dad's own decision for what he did. He didn't want to be a victim, and yet you maintain a relationship with this kid. His kids, and you see the growth that they're doing, and that's not something that you see every day. That's really cool.
It is. I still have a lot of good memories of time working in the schools. And I had a great staff to work with too in the schools. They encouraged us to be there. They liked us being there. And, we just, it was rewarding.
A story that sticks in my mind that I think you told years ago, and that I don't know if you probably remember it as soon as I get into it, but it's always stuck with me and how I do what I do. And you were talking about being in a school, and we always do the weapon retention thing, and how often do we go back and you touch your gun, or you bump it with your forearm or do whatever you know exactly where it's at all times. And there was a kid in school that also knew exactly where that was, and you turned around and reacted when knowing, because we, bad guys or people we arrest or whatever, if they get their hand on our gun, we know it's life or death at that moment. So you feel any kind of tug on that, what's going on. Something similar happened in school, right? At one point.
Yep. I even remember her name,
yeah.
But I won't say it. But yeah, she came up and I've had a pretty good rapport with the kids, but I also, was laid down that, there are things you do and there's things you don't. But she thought it would be funny to come up and grab my gun from behind. And I just was, you react as you train. And that's the thing too, is you train, and me being for defensive tactics, martial arts. I spun around, put her a wrist lock, put her right down on the ground pretty hard. And I hurt her wrist. And some of the other kids were there and they were like, geez, Officer Dye. And then I got angry because I hurt her and I didn't mean to. And so sometimes that happens when I'm like, you guys know what you're not supposed to be doing there. And then I got sent to the principal's office. And the principal at the time, he's like, well, should never do that again, huh? And I'm like, yeah, yes. But I went in and actually I didn't get sent. I went in and talked to him, and then I went to the PD and police department and told my supervisor and then the chief.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know, but nothing came out of it. And but yeah, it was. Oh, I felt bad, but yet I'm glad that training kicked in, and because you never know. But yeah, that.
Right. No, I didn't remember that story you told, and I was like, okay, all right. And not that I didn't take away, hey, start putting 13-year-old girls in bent wrist locks and see what you can do. That's not what I took away from it, but just that knowledge that that feeling, where that thing is supposed to be, and when it's not there, or if it's somebody's messing with it, because it's such a solid tool that like you were talking about, it'll fix it, or it'll change whatever situation it gets brought into. So
that's talking about that, touching it all the time and making sure it's there. I still do the same thing. I still remember when I was in a class tonight, we had a lockbox outside the restroom, and you had to put your weapon in there if you were going to go and use the restroom.
Yeah.
Which now I'm thinking back, I don't know why, but anyway, I was in there, and again, you're by yourself, and I had it in the lockbox and had the key, put it in my pocket, went in, used the restroom, because I was going number 2 instead of number 1, and. So I'm in there, and then all of a sudden the radio goes off that there's a suspicious car, and so I jump out, and always wanting something, maybe it's something good.
Right.
So I jump in the car and I go down there, and I see the car, and I go back up, put the spotlight on it, walk up, see what they're doing, and I go to, because it's suspicious, so I go to put my hand on there, and my thumb goes whoop, right down into my holster.
Empty holster, that is.
Empty holster. That was a oh my gosh moment. You're thinking, oh geez, and I'm starting to think other things like, oh, I hope nothing happens here, because I don't want anybody to know that I left my weapon in there. And I'd only been in law enforcement maybe 2 years at this time.
Yeah.
And we all make mistakes. We do things. Yeah. But I was like, oh my gosh. So, I got their info and I walked back, and I go, well, at least they have my shotgun in the car if they start to come at me there. So I unlocked the shotgun ahead of time and kind of leaned it out.
Right.
And then walked back up again and put my hand over. I usually didn't have my hand on my weapon, when I was just going, and unless I had a real feeling or something that gave me the reasoning to be a little bit more cautious. But and I was always a big believer in trust your gut. You got to trust your gut. You're doing it enough, you got that feeling, and all of a sudden that something's not right. But I went and I had it there because I didn't want them to see that I didn't have a gun.
Yeah.
And so I had kind of covered the holster with my right hand and gave them their ID back and told them, I can't even remember what it was, but then I hurried back in my car and wham, went right back up to the PD to get that out of the locker.
You do it fast enough, could you? Now, I don't know, were you the one that told the story about going to a call? I think you were. And you tell the story, but you went to a call and you got dressed at home, and then you got called out, or another officer needed some assistance, and you went and you got all your stuff and you went to go back them up. And when you showed up, something was missing at that time. Well, so basically the story I recall, and whether it was you, it could have been another instructor. However, they told the story about, I got dressed at home and I had all my stuff at home, and I got called out because there was an officer that needed some assistance. And so I went to go back them up, and I said, okay, so what's going on? And they said, well, okay, I got this. And they reached back for their gun, and it was not in their holster. And because they pulled it out, put it in their lock, their safe at home. He said, luckily they had but they put their backup weapon on there. They had their backup weapon in the spot that they carried it at, and they were able to use that. But they recalled not having their weapon with them when they went and they got called out at some point, just because.
No, I think that one was Ray. I won't say Ray Rowe's full name, but
that's probably right. It was, yeah, that you're probably.
It was.
Yeah.
That was Ray.
So, anyways, you're moving back. We're gonna continue talking about you for a minute, but so you go from Coos Bay, you move up to Kaiser, and you're up at Kaiser for a little while in the early 90s.
No, that was that would have been 99 to 2000.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So you're working in Kaiser, and you realize this is where I'm going to retire, and I'm going to leave from this place here, right?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, I people looked at me in when I said, I had 4 different places that in law enforcement, and they're like, geez, you couldn't keep the place, you couldn't keep the job. And actually that was one reason I didn't get a captain's position at a police department that I had applied for, because they're like, man, you've been at 4 different agencies. But from Clatskanie to Coos Bay, that was a good switch. And then from Coos Bay, I was talked into by the chief. So I was basically working for the same person going into Kaiser. And then there at Kaiser, I only worked patrol for a little while, and then went straight into detectives.
Uh-huh.
Detectives was a great opportunity, and you had to test, and you have to fly and test for it. And I was able to test and get it. And I love detectives. Detectives was another great way to be able to really think about and take not a lot of time, but to really take the case and work the whole thing and try to solve it. It was a good part. That was a good part. And I thought, well, I was always open.
Right.
And then I had been teaching at the Academy for Defensive Tactics since 92.
Kind of a part-time.
Down in Coos Bay. Part-time, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the cool thing was, like 92, 93, 94, 95, I was a senior defensive tactics instructor and a senior vehicle stop instructor and a senior building search instructor. I did those 3 areas.
Mm-hmm.
And DTs was my main. And then later I was myself and Ken were the ones that implemented the ground fighting school at the Academy. So we had started doing that in the evenings. There was Dean, who's just an amazing instructor. And a few others that in the law enforcement world that were great ground fighters. And we put a team together and was able to bring that into the Academy. And so it was involved at the Academy, and for many years, and watched, people come and go at the Academy. And then I was while I was in detectives, I was teaching quite a bit at the academy in the evenings and in the day, and during days that I was off, or I'd take vacation time and go teach. And then the academy at the time was making some changes. You know, they went from just BPST to BPSST, so Board of Police Standards and Training. And then they became a department. So DPSST, Department of Public Safety Standard Training, which kept you certified. Before then, you weren't a certified cop.
Oh, wow.
So you went to the academy, you gave up your certification, whereas there was no way. You know, I wasn't a cop, I'm a state cop. So they had made that change, and then they asked me if I would come and be a lieutenant at the academy. We went in to be making some really strong guidelines on, you know, the staff and who the staff would be. And, you know, we implemented corporals there, sergeants there, lieutenants, captains, major. And at the time we're really, some neat things were going on at the academy in 2000 and 2001 and 02. We had some great management. Oh man, my supervisor there was probably one of the best supervisors that I've been able to serve under. The two of them, Randy Everett and Scott Bruin. The guys are just amazing leaders, just great managers. And so I jumped full time. I said, yeah, you know, they were looking at building this up. Randy was there, and then Scott came in later. Scott Bruin came in later. Talked to a couple of guys coming in, you know, Ken, and then Brian Harvey, Ray Rao. Talked to those guys all to come on board. And Brian became a chief of police, and Ray is a chief of police, or I think he's retired now, but he's doubling back. So the academy was doing great. And that's when I jumped ship from Kaiser and went there full time. Is in June of 2000.
And so you're there and in teaching those three specific disciplines, or were you a general instructor as well, or what?
At the academy, I moved into other things. It was more of a general instructor. I was managing the classes, and at the time managing instructors. We didn't have many people. When I first went out there in 2000, there wasn't many training coordinators out there. And so I think we had 4. And what we did was we managed like the attorneys to come in and teach. And we had more on our plate back then because we had less staff, and they tripled in size over the next, 6-7 years.
Right.
And so, but yeah, there were times that, I'd have to go in and teach a law class, which I was like, oh, that was not my area. But so, if an instructor canceled and all of a sudden they say, well, we don't have an instructor in here, you have to come in and like ethics. They asked me to go through the ethics instructor course. And I said, I'm not going through the ethics instructor course. I mean, my goodness, I said, who am I to tell somebody, how they should be? But I didn't have a choice. They sent me to it because we had an ethics instructor that had retired and was leaving the States, and they couldn't get him in each time of the classes. So I went through the school and became an instructor, and which ironically was probably one of my favorite classes to teach.
Oh, really?
Because of some things that happened early on in my career that, oh goodness, I still get, a little bit, thinking about it. It was kind of a tough experience. My wife had a really horrible childhood, and really bad. And she was abused as a kid. And her stepdad that had abused her, I knew his name, but I never knew who he was.
Right.
And so one night, a deputy that he and I had been in a shooting together. So we became very close and as a bond, and he knew about these things. He was the only one at the time that I had told.
Right.
And so he had asked requests to back up on a domestic. And so I go way out in the Thule brush, in Columbia County and go to help him. And back then it was that domestics, you didn't have to keep your eye on each other. You kind of split up, and he went into the bedroom of the victim and I was out there with the male.
Right.
And the guy gave me his ID, and it happened to be the person who had abused my wife as a child. And so I was like, okay, I'd always thought about this moment, and I wasn't following Christ at the time. And so I pulled my gun out and I put it to his forehead.
Wow.
And I was going to kill him. And I told him, I'm going to kill you. And he looked down, saw my name tag, and he knew who I was. Small community, you know things.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I got upset. I was crying, and I was calling him every MF word that there was.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a Colt 1911, cocked and locked, safety off, 5-pound trigger, finger on the trigger.
Yeah.
And Josh comes out, the deputy comes out, and he's like, right away, trying to figure out what is going on, why, and then he comes up and his gun's out, and he goes, and he looks, and the guy's not armed, and he's back. He kind of backed up towards the wood stove. There was a couch there, so he couldn't go back any further. And all I could say was my wife's name. Yeah. And the deputy then looked I gave him the ID, and then he put his gun away, stepped in front of me, and says, "Get out of here. I got it." He goes, "Go." So he stepped right in front of me. I mean, he was facing me. My gun was still out. So I left. I went back out, sat in my car. And so I sat there, and he did the right thing. The deputy did the right thing. He had probable cause, and he took him out the back door too. He knew me too.
Right. Yeah.
And he knew what I was capable of. So he walked him out, and I didn't even see him put him in the car. And he called me on car to car at the radio. Yeah. Without going through the repeater to dispatch. He says, "I've got him. Don't worry about it. It's you go home. Just go home, Scott." And so I went home. I was supposed to work graveyard, but I called and said into dispatch, said, "Hey, I'm going to go." So I went in. I didn't know how I was going to tell my wife, and I waited probably a couple of weeks till I told her that I had confronted him. But so when it's probably a year after I was teaching the ethics course that I asked my wife, I go, "Can I share the story?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, because I kind of felt like it's because, in ethics, I started the class off. I'd say, "Have you ever had any ethical dilemmas, to the class?" And I go, "And who am I to be up in front of anybody telling, I've done stupid things in my life. I've called people names. I've done things that I regret. I'm not the perfect person in the world. I'm probably not the most ethical person in this classroom. We rated each other to start it out on a 1 to 10 on the scale. And I just see, well, you are more ethical than I think I am." And then I would tell him, I said, "But, what gives me the right to come up here and teach in front of anybody?"
Yeah. And
then I would share the story, and I'd go into more detail. And usually I got pretty choked up on it too, because it meant it's pretty close to home and it's very personal.
Yeah.
And, I would go into detail on the challenges of, having a wife who was abused and then coming home in the middle of the night and having to wake her up, until, so, there's these challenges. And so I would say, well, I'd tell the story. And so I'd say, yeah, I've had ethical dilemmas, and I didn't do what I wanted to do. I made the right choice. I stopped, I paused, and I didn't do it because, all these thoughts were going through your mind when you're doing something like that. I thought, hey, I got a knife on me. I'm going to throw it down. I'm going to say he tried to get it. Within seconds, all this thought was, if I kill him, I'm going to have to, justify. How do you justify? He's unarmed. And so all these thoughts are going through too. And I knew everything was wrong. I'm like going, no. And there was something and now I'm, kind of figure out what I believe, was that the spirit inside me, the Holy Spirit inside of me was also telling me, "Dude, you can't do this."
You're right.
And so I made that right decision. But there are times in your career that you're going to be challenged with the biggest challenge ever, and you have to make the right decision.
Yeah.
And so I was then at that moment it hit me. I said, "You know what? Okay." So I did. I loved teaching the ethics class because I had had challenges in my life that I made the right decisions several times. That was the worst one there, but there were others. And you got to make that right decision. And so, yes, what gives me the right to go in there and teach it? Well, not saying that judging anybody on it, but saying that you have options. And I've actually had students, I had taught over 5,000, 6,000 recruits, during the time that I taught at the academy.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had students that have come up years later and say, hey, man, you really helped me on that one. With similar things in family or, where they're like, you really helped me.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you never know. You absolutely have zero idea. And like you said, what made you, what gave you the whatever to be able to teach the class? Who were you to be able to teach it? Well, you're just like everybody else. That's what gave you the ability to do it. Is you're human. You make decisions, whether they're right or wrong. The decision you made, and are we able to look at that and say, well, he should have done that? Well, maybe 500 years ago, yes, that would have been the decision to make. Who knows? But everything's different now than obviously it was back then. The other side of it is you have the ability to say, this is what this ethic is. This is what this decision would have cost me, or this is what that thing would have been that I would have done. And you can go left or you can go right. Whichever way you go, you have to live with that. And I'm not teaching this to you because I know all of it. I'm teaching this to you because I had to make a decision and I turned a certain direction that my whole life is affected from, good, bad, or otherwise. In this case, it worked out because your wife obviously would have found out, and you would have been away from your wife for the rest of your life, probably.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's no, I look at it now back, after detectives and everything else, there's no way that I would have been able to do that, knowing when it all came out, knowing who it was, and the, that correlation with my wife and my son and daughter. We had 2 kids at the time. My daughter was fairly new. She was just born. They would have been without a dad,
but
I've been able to, be with my family for 34 years, 33 years. My wife and I just hit our 35th year wedding anniversary. So,
cool.
I've had that time with them, and it's just been a blessing. Got a great family. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody does things, but I love my family, and I'm glad that I was able to, make the right choices in my life too, and be where I'm at today.
Right. But that, I guess that on the other side of it is that's who is able to teach the class, is somebody who's gone through it. I mean, who's I don't know, an elementary school teacher? What makes them qualified? They went to school, they got a certificate to teach and all this stuff. Yeah. But once they were an elementary school student. So, I mean, if you've gone through it, you have the ability to teach it. You should anyways, if you've taken the time to have some introspective time to look at yourself. So I think it's important.
My wife and I were just talking about that this morning, on people doing things that didn't have that. Like, I went and took a college course on business management, and years ago. And then I find out the instructor, the professor at the college, tried to open his own business and it failed. And I'm thinking, okay, but yet he's teaching me on business and he had it fail. I'm like, so I didn't pay a lot of attention in the class.
Yeah. And then there's that saying that those who can't teach. Well, that's not always the case, but I'm sure everybody can look at like, well, yeah, I did have an instructor in college, or I did have a, whatever. But for the most part, weigh it. And if somebody's open and honest and they put their ego aside and they're able to say, well, yeah, I had this issue and this is why I'm teaching the class. Oh, wow. Oh, that's.
Yeah. It was so funny because who wants to teach ethics? I mean, 4 hours of ethics, come on. Nobody wants to sit in that class for 4 hours.
Yeah.
But after, like I said, after a while, and then it coming to me to where I enjoyed it. I actually, got to where I didn't look at, I looked at it as, well, decisions that you have to make. I guess it was more of ethics as doing the right thing, but using life experiences that to help you out through situations that you're going to be in.
Yeah.
And it just seemed like I was always in it. I mean, I was always involved in the middle of all kinds of stuff. So, and I just like to keep going. You know, and that's why I was successful in the corporate world after I got out of, when I retired law enforcement.
Right. So you were talking about, so I'm going to kind of segue into that. You were talking about, you did that till, I don't know, you've been out since, 13 years or whatever. Well, it's been about 14 years because you were one of our class coordinators when I was in the police academy, and you left just before we graduated or whatever to go into the corporate world. And so, and it's been about 14 years about that point. So
now you were 301, or what were you?
295.
295. Yeah.
Yeah.
295. I actually have I'm in my home office here, and I have plaques and that up on the wall on the other side here, and a lot of them from classes.
Yeah.
And I actually keep a binder, 3 binders of every class that I had. And I always kept the pictures because there's pictures and the names. And then I had notes on every one of them.
Oh, really?
And I also would rate people. I got really good at, I would do a numbering, and I would put, if I would think somebody after the first couple of weeks in the academy, I would put if I would think they would ever make it or not in law enforcement.
Oh, really?
And then when I would talk to people, over the years, that people would say something like, I think it was you that was telling me the other day about a couple of the other people who had left and went to OSP.
Uh-huh.
And so I would go back, and I had if I thought where I thought they were, and I put things like if they were military, if they were family men, if they were in company before, what they did, and I had all these little notes on every single person.
Oh, really?
And I still have all those binders. I will never get rid of them. Just because I'll find somebody and somebody will say, I mean, I've run into people that I've known all the way into Chicago at like one of the police conventions, or LA or wherever, and people traveled around, and then they will say, hey, you remember so and so they got this happened to them or something, and I'm like, really? And then I'd go back and check my notes to see if I was even correct. Like, there's been people that were indicted, there are people that got fired, there are people that got arrested, there are people that did some silly things, and there's people that have been now that are chiefs and promoted and been successful. And so I always like to see where I was on my rating. I was pretty darn accurate.
You're pretty good, huh?
Yeah.
So that's gonna be the thing is everybody's gonna listen to this, and then they're gonna, in years to come after you passed away, there's gonna be all these former recruits lining up at your door, and your kids
to see what.
Let's see what my dad said about you. Yeah.
Oh.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine what you'd said about me.
I looked at the notes. There.
What did you say?
Military and color guard. You were on color guard, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Weren't you on color? Yeah.
Yep.
And I would always put everything that people volunteer to or what they do to. And
cool.
You had a pretty good rating.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Starting out personally, I didn't know how well I was going to do, and I had a bit of a bumpy start, but it eventually panned out, I guess. So yeah.
Oh gosh, bumpy starts. I told a sergeant, okay, I usually don't curse, right? So I was very upset with the sergeant, very upset. And this cost me sergeant.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I was really upset with the sergeant. He was a horrible supervisor. And I'm not going to say his name. I will not. But when I say this, people, if they know me, they know, especially from Coos Bay. I told the sergeant that I was going to go over to his house. I was going to rip his head off. I was going to shit down his neck.
Yeah. Great.
And because of something that he had done, and it was wrong. And I was really ticked. And so I was getting dressed to go over there. And the chief calls me after the captain had called me. The chief called me and he goes, you're still on probation. And I hadn't been there a year. It was just right under a year. And so I settled down, and the chief talked to me out of being really upset. I was kind of the a fireball back then, Spitfire. And so, but that next promotion process, it was all they didn't take the top and the bottom and throw them out. They took the I can't remember if it was 5 or 7, but the one sergeant that I had said that to rated me at like a 30%, and everybody else had rated me into the 90s. Oh. There was one other person that 30 put me below to where the other person got promoted for sergeant.
Man,
promotion process. But so I always say, yep, that decision that I did there, and you look back and you go, okay, what could I have done differently? Well, there was a lot of things I could have done differently. And I look back going, okay, these are the things that I should have done, but I didn't do it. There are people that still remember that, though, that reminds me that all the time that I had said that. And that was back in, that had to have been 92 or, about probably into 92. So that was a few years ago. Was that 30 years ago?
Geez.
Well, yeah. Well, but next year will be 30. It was 29 years ago.
Wow.
And there are people that still remind me of that. Like, oh yeah, you remember when you told so-and-so that?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, thanks for reminding me of that.
I'm an ethics teacher. I don't do that sort of thing. So
yeah, we've all had moments, and there's, I've learned a lot more over the years, just to stop, especially the emails, nowadays with communication, that to stop before you send it. When I was working in the corporate world, I get fired up pretty easy too. And I had no filter, and I would fire off an email, but then I learned real quick though, read it 3 times and then wait. And I got pretty good at doing that. Unless I had surgery and was under anesthesia, I ended up having my wife, she would hide my phone because I would call the owner of the company and say, I can't believe you have so-and-so managing this division. They're a piece of crap. And I don't remember saying it, but most of the time I was pretty close very close. And those people that I would call ended up leaving the company after a while because they were doing silly things.
That's funny.
They shouldn't be doing. But
so did you said got into the corporate world and you're doing stuff, and I realize on like emails, if you got something you want to say and you're getting to that point where you're like you're so fired up, you're so angry, you want to hit this person back or whatever you want to be, and you realize, okay, I got to be the better person. Still type it out, type out the words you want to say, and then so you see it on there, but then just backspace all that out of there, read it like you said 3 times. Yes, it's not going to sound good. Come back to it, backspace all that, and then type in, okay, I'll see you there, or whatever it is that you're gonna. But yeah, nothing says you can't type it out, because you can always just don't send it. Just don't.
Sometimes though, you might make the mistake to hit send and go, no, I just sent that, and so
then you gotta go back and do some damage control.
If you start going, wait a while before even the first one. I've done the same thing, and if I start right away, it's really bad. If I wait a little while, my wife, she just, it drives her crazy. I will be on the phone and I'll be pacing. I pace. I go walk all around. I walk outside, walk the front yard. I walk around and walk when I'm talking on the phone.
Yeah,
and I can't just sit still.
Yep, me neither.
And
I can't either.
If you're going to send an email out like that, wait. And then and the other thing I always used to do is I would never send an email to anybody in the company that, let's say I had several managers under me. And so I would talk to them in person first if I had a situation that I wanted to know. And then after I would talk to them in person, then I would always go and follow it up with an email and say, this is what we discussed, the points we did. Because emails have no personality. They don't have no voice inflection. They have no emotion in it. So people could read it one way, and people do all the time. They're like, oh, they're pissed. Oh, I'm gonna get fired. Oh, this. Yeah. And if you talk to people first, and it's funny, I know this guy, actually, I was just talking to you about him a little bit ago. He ran a company, and a very large company. And he was I thought this is hilarious what he did. I mean, a very, very large company. And he was in his office and other people were in offices. They had a huge corporate building and people would email the person in the next office instead of going. And he had found that out. And so he would shut the computers off completely in the company from the 10th to the 20th every month.
Oh, wow.
10 days.
Up and go talk to people, huh?
No computers. They would not be able to communicate. They would have to do it in person.
You had to go face to face to people.
Yep. And even people outside the company, they'd have to call them.
Yeah.
And I was just actually thinking about that the other day. This is hilarious. And this wasn't too long ago. So you know how people are so dependent on computers and nowadays that the whole company would shut down. Boom, blank, nothing. 10th to the 20th.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's cool. You know, I get to that point where somebody say, "Hey, did you do XYZ or what? Who's this person?" or something like that. And it may be maybe I tend to say too much or whatever, but I can't just say yes or that. I feel the urge that I just got to go down the hallway and be like, okay, yeah, that is, but here's why this is, or yes, and you know, whatever. And I try to go into more detail because I think I'm all about over communication. I'll tell my people, if you got to over communicate with me, I don't care. If you've told me 4 times, I'm good with that. But just because I don't want to be not in the know and I don't want somebody else to not be in the know. And so if I have the information, I can share it. But going face to face with the person, I'll do that way more often than I probably have to. And whether I annoy my bosses or not, it's another story. I probably do, but I think they're used to me by now. So.
Well, in that corporation, it was funny that after shutting them off, the year after, the employee retention went up, productivity went up, satisfaction of the customer satisfaction went up. He was very, very successful, wow. And sold it for, and now after selling it, the people that were involved in that company message him all the time going, man, I wish you would have never sold this company.
Yeah. Wish you were still here, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. So, but much better to talk to people first and then follow up with emails. And even if it's a quick phone call, texting, I know a lot of people text, a lot of people do that. And, that's okay on some things, but man, there's nothing better than really just talking to somebody. And
even you're building relationships, and that's important, whether at work or whatever you're doing, build a relationship. So you mentioned earlier, Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman, and so that you're a friend of his and you know him.
Yes.
It's not just that you know him and you're friends with him now, but there's a little history there that you didn't realize was actually there, correct?
Yeah, we went to train when he was a sergeant as a Green Beret. He and I went to some training together, same training. And then later realized that when we had hooked up in the 90s, and then I have been able to, travel around with him at certain places and help him out. And then of course he always helps me out too. He sent me the best book that he ever has had. That I agree. I mean, all the books are great, but this one is called On Spiritual Combat. And if you're following Christ, I mean, this is an awesome book. Absolutely. So I'm promoting his book here on Spiritual Combat. It's really a great book. I'm halfway through it right now. He just got it not too long ago. He sent me a couple for some friends that he autographed for them for me.
That's cool. That's cool. So he's also known for writing. He's got this ridiculous knowledge in regards to use of force and stuff, right?
Well, not quite use force. It's the mentality of what happens when you actually have to use deadly force.
Right.
So he's got the first book that he wrote was called On Killing.
Right.
And then the next book was On Combat. And then he's got Warrior Mindset. He wrote a book called Teaching Our Kids to Kill. Mm-hmm. One of his expertises, I would say, is the youth and school shootings. And he testified. He was at the White House. He's done. The guy's amazing. His book called On Killing was up for a Pulitzer Prize award. He always jokes. He goes, "Yeah, I didn't win, but he was nominated." He his heart, and that's the thing. His heart is all for training, law enforcement, military, spec ops. He's trained more spec ops and specialty teams all around the world. And
cool.
this COVID time has really kind of put a damper on that. And then now with all the Antifa and the cancel culture and all that, they're kind of on him a little bit. So
you guys went to some schools together and stuff like that, and then you get out of police work, you go work in the private sector, and then you hook back up with him and realize, and so now he's one of your best friends, and you see him often enough, huh?
Well, we try to hook up probably. Well, lately, I don't think I've seen him for a year, with COVID and all that.
Yeah.
At least about a year and a half, maybe. But the neat thing, when I was traveling around, when I was working for Vigilant, and then we got bought by Motorola, I was our national director, so I would fly all over the place. And if he was in places, I would pop in and was able to pop in and see him. Like, he was down at CHP, California Highway Patrol Academy, and I popped in there. And then I met two warriors there that are amazing, that had some deadly force encounters. And so we took them out to dinner, and it was awesome. So the colonel and I and three of the guys from CHP were there. And the neat thing with me working in the corporate world, our customer base is law enforcement all around the world and the nation. So I've befriended some guys all over the place that are so cool. At Las Vegas Metro PD and Texas and Florida, and have got these relationships and friendships, and pretty cool. So I stay in touch with quite a few of them now that I'm retired. But Dave Grossman, Colonel's going to start out it again. And he said he was at two cities just the other day, and it's really an honor to hear about him going back out and teaching again, and even people are excited about it because they gave him a standing ovation. And
right, that information he's got has got to get out there, because these people, they think they know everything, and they just second guess the cops, and they do all these different things, and so all this different stuff, and he has this knowledge that he can explain it to people in a way that they can understand where the police are coming from when they have to use force, or they have to shoot somebody or something like that. It's not because they want to and they've got nothing else to do, and I'm going to make the last resort the first resort, and whatever. That's not, and he can explain that in a way they can understand it, and I think it's incredibly important that he gets that stuff out there. So,
definitely.
Saying,
it's like,
I don't even know.
After you're in a shooting, you do weird stuff. And it wasn't, I didn't go to any of his classes until probably about 3 years after the shooting I was involved with. And I went and set a flare pattern out on this highway, and there was no need to, but I did. And it was the nicest one that anybody had ever seen. But it's like, why do you do what you do? And then it wasn't till later that when I was at Coos Bay, that I was with the OPOA, Oregon Police Officers Association, a training organization.
Uh-huh.
And what a great organization there too. I'll put a plug in there. I was blessed to be the president. I think there's only been 3 guys in the entire time of OPOA that was nominated twice for president, and luckily, and I was blessed that they had the faith in me, that they nominated me twice as president. That was there when I was with OPOA that I got to hook up with Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman again, and then I had to pick him up at an airport. I would travel him down, take him somewhere, and then we just, the talking and the communication, and after that, he'd call me and say, "Hey, you want to be here? Hey, can you help me out here? Hey,
that's cool.
Pick me up here," and I'd always bring him a gun too, like when he same type of thing.
Yeah, that same thing.
I pull into the airport and open it up. I go, "You want the 1911 or you want the the SIG?" Or he's like, "Oh, 1911." He's a big 1911.
Yeah, old fashioned. Yeah. Huh?
I did that to a New York, a retired New York commander who I got to work with at the last company, and flew him in. We were speaking at the homicide conference convention over in Bend. So I picked him up at the airport, and I opened up my center console, which is a pretty big center console, and I had 3 guns with holsters. I go, I don't know which one you want. And he just started laughing. He goes, dude, he goes, I've traveled everywhere. He goes, I have never had anybody do that. And he goes, that is super cool. So I go, hey.
That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So another person that we talked about that has been a major influence in your life and stuff like that you've kind of touched on, but you haven't really got a chance to, explain too much about. Who's this lady that you keep calling wife? Who's
Angela.
How did you meet this wonderful angel?
Oh man. So I went to Klatskanai to get to know my biological dad, and I was there for the 4th of July festival. So my wife actually always jokes that here, 3 days ago for the 4th, that's what we call our sweaty palm anniversary.
Oh, okay.
And she was walking through the park in these white pants, and I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
And I had a friend of mine. It was really funny because I had a friend of mine that was standing next to me, and I had sunglasses on, and it was getting dusk, and I forgot that I had my sunglasses on.
Yeah.
And I was watching her as she was walking, and my buddy leaned over and raised up my sunglasses. So all of a sudden it was like, she got, whoa. I mean, it was like, there's the one. And so the funny part was I still have to this date, a 54 Chevy pickup. And it was my high school rig. And it was parked there at the park. And earlier, her dad's a hot rodder. My father-in-law is a hot rodder.
Yeah.
And they were loving my truck. She loved the truck. She didn't even know it was mine. So I am now trying to impress her at the park. And I won one of the little goldfish. People are going to think I'm actually nuts. Remember, I just got out of the Marine Corps.
Sure.
And I actually won one of those little fish at one of the deal where you get a little goldfish in a package,
right.
In a little Ziploc baggie.
Yeah.
And so, trying to impress her, I took it out and swallowed it whole. Just what any Marine would do.
Sure. Sure that did it.
She did not want to have anything to do with me. I mean, she's like, there's no way. But she actually she said she thought, I was cute. And, took me 3 days to find her number. I got her number from my brother and called and said, hey, and then we started talking on the phone, and then she found out I was the owner of the 54 Chevy. So then she was okay with me coming over to the house to meet her dad. And so I brought the truck over, and then we went on a date. Rest is history. She's been supporting me ever since. And
that's cool. That's really cool. And she's been with you the thick and thin and every minute of the way, huh?
Thick and thin. She's been my rock, she's, and the coolest thing is I accepted Christ, February 4th of 2017. So, she had always been good with the Lord, but she never bugged me. I was like, I ain't going to church. I don't want to go to church. But I always felt there was something more. I mean, even that situation to where I wanted to kill her ex-stepdad or whatever it was. I always felt there was something. So she always wanted to go once in a while. She never pushed me into it. But then when we moved out where we're at now, there was a church close by, and I thought, I can get in and out of it once in a while. And again, she was always supportive. So we did go, and then I ended up accepting Christ, and it's been amazing. Our journey lately has just been great. My calmness, I've always had a pretty tightly wound, and I get wound up, and I'd have to take a chill pill to go to Portland because I just hate going up to there and
sure.
And even flying out of the airport. But it's just been there's a calming, and it's pretty cool. We've been real involved with our church, but she never pushed anything on her whole life. That's why I said she would have been a great wife to have as in the military. I would have been very successful there if I would have met her before, because she's just a good person, and she was a great mother. We have 2 great kids. We have a son and a daughter. Now we have 2 granddaughters. My son-in-law is a state trooper. My son's working, with the military with counter drug, and he's the senior enlisted, running counter drug. And so I've got a grandson and 2 granddaughters, and it's pretty cool to.
Did you notice, and this is obviously kind of off topic, but that after you started going to church with her and you got saved and all this stuff, did you notice your relationship, your marriage change in a better way at all? Or
oh gosh, yes, there's so much more honesty. So I when we first were married, I quit drinking.
Right.
And being in the Marines, I like to drink.
Sure.
And then when I became in law enforcement, I had a situation that she wasn't happy about. I didn't come home. I was out partying with some guys instead, and instead of coming home, I stayed out and came home the next day. And she was pretty upset about it. And I was like, "What do you want me to do?" She goes, "Well, I don't like that. You didn't come home, and I don't like it." And I go, "I'll quit drinking." She goes, "You will?" I go, "Yeah, I'll quit." So I did. I quit for 12 years or so, maybe 15 years, but it was quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
And didn't drink at all. And then traveling a little bit, I was like, I'd have a drink once in a while. I never told her. So I went for 6-7 years, and my buddies would cover it too. They like, if we go out, and I'd have a drink once in a while, and I wouldn't tell her. I'd come home, and I was home, I'd never have any. But then if I'd go somewhere, I'd have drinks with my buddies and or out at dinner somewhere, and never tell her. And so then when I accepted Christ, I went to a men's retreat.
Uh-huh.
And at the men's retreat, the speaker was really dogging on people not being truthful and opening it up, and especially with family. And I came home and I broke down with my wife and told her I've been lying to her. I've been hiding it from her. And and that right there, it was tough. I think what was really hard on her is that some of my friends would cover. They covered for me too, because
Right.
there's that bond. You
Sure.
got some military, law enforcement. You cover your brother or sister. But she was pretty upset that other people wouldn't say anything. And I told her, I said, well, I think they would have if I had a problem, but I wouldn't go out and get crazy. I just would have a couple of drinks.
Yeah.
But I felt so guilty, and I think, and I just opened and I was honest to her about everything. And that right there, it's like, wow, there was a couple, there's things it's like wow. But what a way to now not have anything to hide, and asking for forgiveness. It has really brought us closer. I always would dabble a little bit. I'd go to church here and there, and there were some pastors that I really liked. I got friends that are strong Christians, but it never stuck. And I always, would find an excuse not. But now, once I've completely surrendered my life over, and my heart, where my heart is, our relationship is amazing. And I retired last year at the end of, almost 7 months ago, I retired. And I'm not doing anything. I'm doing a little consulting on use of force.
Right.
But she had a hair salon, and she decided she just gifted her hair salon to a young lady that she really likes and has a lot of faith in. And so she's gifted her hair salon, and she's done. So now we're free. We're taking our fifth wheel. We're traveling. We're looking what the next step is. We want to maybe go and there's a program that you go work on churches, and you travel with, and they let you stay on the property, you plug into your RV, and you work on a church, you go to the next one. And we're just waiting to see what the right thing is for us at this time. Or I have been teaching some classes here and there on situational awareness and use of force for people with CCWs, and law enforcement has contacted me, members that I've known, that they want it for their family or friends, or people that they know to take a class. And so
Right.
I haven't done a lot of advertising on it or done it. It's just been, and having the faith to leave. So I left the company. So Motorola bought Vigilant, And I thought I was going to get canned because usually, managers get canned. And I was our director at the time of corporate security
Uh-huh.
and for the company. And I thought I was going to get canned. And then I ended up getting a promotion and with the corporate world. So then I became our national and international director for a while. And the money's silly money. I was making silly money. And we never relied on it, though. That's how we ended up, if we wanted, buying the fifth wheel or anything else, the new Dodge truck, all that. We never, as a cop, of course, sometimes you don't have the luxuries to buy those things, especially buy them out. So we'd always have to figure out, well, can we afford this monthly payments? And
right.
And then we got to where we could do pretty much anything we wanted. And the company had to offer me in last July of 2020 an early out because of the position I was in. And so they offered it to me, but our CEO from the last company, he got promoted to like senior VP over at Motorola. Well, he had told my boss, who was a VP, and I had transferred into a different division, that, oh yeah, Scott won't take it. He won't give that money up. I was the first person out of everybody offered to sign those papers and say, I'm done. And the cool thing is, I don't miss the money. We're doing fine, my wife and I, and now she's done, and hers. She didn't have a pension. She's just put in a little bit with owning her own hair salon.
Right.
But we have the faith to where we're just going to do whatever we're going to do, and it seems like I've been also put into positions or had things happen to me. All of a sudden, it's like, wow, I wasn't expecting that. But it's not all about the money, and the money was good, and that's I was getting to. OPOA is wanting me to teach a class called Cops to Corporate. I came up with a course.
Oh, right.
And I am probably going to write that course. I started, dabbling a little bit and writing notes and getting ready to do something and to help, because a lot of people that are taking early out of retirement, or maybe they would think about doing 25 or 28 or 30 years in law enforcement. Now they've got to their 20 and they're 55 years old and they're like going, I'm out.
Yeah.
And so, or if somebody's preparing for a couple of years, there's some things that you can do. And I mean, we had people in the company that I work for, that I was able to get them into positions, and they were, making 250, 300, 350 a year. So,
wow.
And
that's better than cop money.
Yeah, it's better than cop money. I like I said, I wasn't used to it, because I think even as a lieutenant at the academy, I was maybe making $68,000 a year. When the academy didn't pay a lot, but you go to that to, 4 or 5 times as much, and it's like,
what do I do with this? Well, let's put it in the bank. I don't know.
Yep. Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff. Now, I'm not the smartest person and the best for investments and that. That I usually did was the wrong thing, but it's nice to be able to, have those options.
Sure.
But so I'm looking at possibly doing that course, Cops to Corporate, and I'll do it through the POA and see how that does, and do a 4-hour or 6-hour class.
Yeah. Now I know you're not overly techie. You're a little more old fashioned, and you probably still walk over to your TV to change the channel, right? And then watch.
No, not quite that bad, but we don't watch much TV. So when we do,
there you go.
But I don't have the voice command one, which the TV, if something has set up that way, I go, I don't even want them listening to me. Somebody said, well, hey, you need one of these Alexa things, and gave me an Alexa thing, and it's in a drawer. I'm like, I'm not having that thing listen to me. Right. And I have this little slide thing on my computer, and I always keep it like that, because I don't trust my computer to look at me if I'm not.
Yeah, what are you looking at? Yeah.
Exactly. So the funny thing was, the company I was working for, we did software analytics and technology, and that's what we did. Mm-hmm. So to work for them, it wasn't my skills of technical knowledge, that's for sure, because even the owner laughed at me. saying, well, if you don't work out in that management there, we can always, you'll be our highest paid janitor ever. And
There you go.
but all he wanted was three things, and that was honesty, hard work, and the ability to learn. And he said, well, 2 out of 3 out of your case isn't bad.
Right. The ability to learn is another question. Yeah.
So, but it was. I've had a good run. I still feel young, like, because sometimes I feel like I still want to go do something. But what my things are now is just to enjoy life and travel and meet people and I like meeting people and talking to people.
That's cool. That's cool. So normally I'll ask people, where can people find you on social media or whatever, and you're elusive. Let's just say you're elusive on social media. You can find you, but you're elusive.
I do have an account with LinkedIn that for professional. I like the professional. I was going to delete my Facebook, but I actually still have a Facebook, but I haven't been on it. Maybe I posted something about my wife and I having our anniversary, and then I posted something about flying here not too long ago. But I don't get on it to look at it much, and I want to get it. If I do, I'm gonna actually try to get it down to like 300 people or 200 people. So because I have too many people on Facebook.
Yeah, if you do get your Cops to Corporate going, you get that business up and running, put it on there. Get people can take a look at it, or any other corporate things that you're working on. So
probably. So I opened up a consulting company and investigations. I went into the academy and got my PI license, and I didn't do anything with it in 2 years. So I just let it lapse. I was like, all right, they had me, they wanted me to do a couple of cases of, and my personal beliefs, didn't like it. So I said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to take that one. I don't agree with what they're doing. And so, and the nice thing is I can have that ability. I mean, I am retired, so I don't have to take something I don't want to. So I let the PI license expire, but I still have that consulting, and it's called 10-5 consulting. And the funny thing is, there's the 10 code in law enforcement. People would think that it's because I'm law enforcement. It has to do with law enforcement, but there's no 10-5 code in the 10 code.
Right.
But there is a 10-5 in the Bible, and it's Zechariah 10-5 is what my company was named after, because I woke up and that stuck in my mind, and I flipped open the Bible and found the 10-5, and I'm like, oh, that's perfect. So
what is Zechariah 10-5?
Well, see, that's what somebody's going to have to look it up, because then you have to take the time to do
it. Perfect. Well, Scott, I know we've been on here for a while, and I know you got some stuff you got to go do and all that other stuff, and I've got to get to work on some other things myself. So I have thoroughly enjoyed you being on the show today, and I think people listening just totally would enjoy getting to know you and hearing from you as well. And so once again, just thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. I don't know if I put anything out there that is really for what your podcast is. I still have other people that I think would do an amazing job on here.
Sure.
And we'll get Colonel Grossman on here for you. That's going to happen.
That would be cool.
He already made me that promise, so he keeps his promises. So that'll be something people look forward to.
Very cool.
But thanks for asking me. I'm humbled that you would even have me on to a podcast like this, and
no, you're
I appreciate it.
You're no, because it's a hero, and you absolutely embody that. From your attitude, the way you treat people, your dedication to service of other people, and making sure that your fellow man is taken care of, before yourself the majority of the time. That's what makes a hero, and I think you embody that quite well. So I appreciate that, and like I said, thanks for coming on. So
thanks. So it's an honor. It's been an honor.
So just for everybody else, if you want to get a hold of the What's a Hero podcast, you can get a hold of us on any of our social media. Or, we've got one on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on what's the other one? What am I missing? Oh, Instagram. And you can get a hold of us there. You can get a hold of us on our website. Well, I don't know if you can get a hold of us on our website, but you can see us on our website where you can actually get all of our former episodes. You can go back and listen to all of those. It also has a link to each one of whatever your favorite podcast platform is. You go on there, listen, say, hey, I do Apple Podcasts. That's one I like to listen to because on my iPhone or whatever. Go click into there. That'll take you over to it, and you can download our episodes and download it, listen to it. I know a lot of people listen just right on the website, and they can pull it up without having to download. Download numbers actually kind of are kind of cool for us. We can kind of see who's listening and who's not, who is, but how many people are listening, and we can kind of go off of there. And it helps us if you put a review on any one of those, on say like Apple Podcasts or whatever, and you put a review on there and say, hey, this happened, or, this is what I'm doing to help out other people or something like that, or serve people. Great. I'd love to hear those stories. The other side is you let me know about, what you guys want to, if you suggest there's people out there, because I've got some people that I can talk to, and you never know. But if there's somebody that you say, oh, I think that person would be great, absolutely, let's get them connected, and we can hear some stories about people serving other people and putting others first. So, like I said, that is at What's a Hero, or the What's a Hero podcast.buzzsprout.com is for our website. And then obviously you can get a hold of, us on Twitter, on Instagram, on the Facebook, and on, you can get a hold of me on LinkedIn as well. So I want to thank Scott once again for being on. Scott, do you have any final words of wisdom for everybody before we check out?
No, just keep a good attitude and try to be positive. Nobody likes being around somebody negative. So, it doesn't matter where you're at. Your law enforcement, your family, lead by example, lead by positive. I had one of the coolest things the other day is my friend of mine knew one of my former employees, and he had ran into him, and he goes, hey, I've been hanging around with Scott Dye. And that guy said, oh man, I missed him. He was the best boss I ever had my whole life. And to hear things like that, I'm like, oh man, really? I'm like, he must have had some pretty crappy bosses, but being positive. And that's one of the things that I believe that a lot of people will say. I've always been, you could be in the middle of stirring that crap barrel, and you have to have a good attitude about it. And the veteran friends will know what that is, the old days of stirring that crap barrel. But right. And just have a positive. You got to be positive. And if you, and again, like old George Thompson used to say, fake it till you make it. Even if you're having a bad day, come in and try to be positive around your coworkers, your loved ones. My wife and I, we laugh so much. Oh my gosh, I'm so goofy. And just having a good time and being goofy. If that's in you, do it. If it's not, try to get it. Just be a little bit, goofy.
Right. Exactly.
It always just makes the day go better. So that's all I got. I appreciate it again.
Perfect.
I'm a talker, so we could probably go for another hour. But
yeah, that's all right. That's all right. So anyways, for the What's a Hero podcast, and for Scott Dye, I have been Ken Frownfelter. And like I said, this has been the What's a Hero podcast. We are clear.